fire consumes the imperial palace as a violent rebellion erupts overnight, with rebel forces demanding the emperor's downfall while loyalists rally to defend him. Amidst the roaring flames, the purple-haired princess flees into the chaotic night. While her court ladies urge her to move faster, the purple-haired princess feels strangely detached from the burning ruin of her home. Her gaze lingers on the destruction with a chilling, quiet melancholy. Escaping the inferno, the small group plunges deep into the dark, moonlit forest. Disaster strikes during their desperate flight as one of the court ladies trips and crashes to the ground. The fallen court lady desperately apologizes for delaying their escape, but the princess refuses to leave her behind. Showing deep compassion, the purple-haired princess helps her up and requests they stop to rest. The exhausted group takes a brief moment of shelter beneath the towering ancient trees. Reassuring her companion, the princess promises that a short rest will do them no harm. Grateful for her mistress's kindness, the court lady complies as they try to catch their breath. Looking up at the full moon, the princess's mind wanders to a tragic past figure who faced a similar hunt. She remembers a dark-haired man bleeding out across a freezing, snow-covered plain. In her memory, the heavily wounded man collapses helplessly onto the cold snow. A final, desperate hand reaches out before darkness takes him completely. A harsh voice suddenly shatters the silence of the forest, alerting the escapees that they have been spotted. Threatening mercenaries block their path, forcing the loyal court ladies to shield the princess with their lives. The blue-haired bandit leader mockingly demands to know who wants to bed first. Cruel laughter echoes through the dark woods as the bandits surround the helpless maidens. Observing the fluid grip on his sword, the princess realizes these foes are highly trained killers. Fear grips her heart as she identifies them as members of the notorious criminal syndicate, the Sword Pacts. Shaking with terror, she wonders how these assassins managed to track them so quickly. The menacing leader commands the princess to surrender quietly, promising to keep her alive. Thinking fast, the princess agrees to surrender if they spare her loyal courtiers. A sudden, terrified scream echoes through the dark forest canopy. Before any deal can be made, a brutish bandit grabs one of the helpless court ladies. The vile thug physically harasses the weeping woman, celebrating their easy victory. The outraged princess demands he release her servant, but the leader grabs her instead. Violent hands clamp down tightly, sealing the princess's grim fate. The sadistic leader overpowers her, whispering that they intend to have fun with her first. Sudden rushing footsteps tear through the underbrush, catching the assailants off guard. Fueled by rage, the loyal chief court lady lunges forward and tackles the bandit leader. Shocked by the assault, the leader aggressively strikes the brave elder away. The chief court lady is thrown against a tree, bleeding heavily as the leader pins the princess. The enraged brute wraps his hand tightly around the princess's neck, choking her. In a desperate move, she pulls out a hidden dagger and threatens to end her own life to ruin their bounty. Realizing his valuable prize is at risk, the furious leader reluctantly backs away. He suddenly lunges back, knocking the weapon away and pinning her throat once more. With a bloody nose and a sinister grin, the madman vows to make her pay. His grip tightens around her throat, cutting off her precious air. He sneers at her royal pride, enjoying her slow descent into suffocating darkness. Facing death, her thoughts drift back to her lost love, Lord Kyung. As her vision fades, a silent cloaked figure stealthily approaches from the shadows behind them. With blood staining her face, the princess wonders why she was allowed to live this long. A sharp steel blade suddenly bursts through the bandit leader's chest from behind. The lifeless brute collapses to the ground, freeing the gasping princess. Shaking and gasping for breath, she looks up to see her mysterious savior. Bathed in moonlight stands none other than her lost warrior, Lord Kyung. Tears stream down her face as she stares at his unmistakable handsome features. Reaching out, she whispers his name, unable to believe her long-lost love is finally alive. Just as hope sparks, a cold reality shatters her heart as he coldly confirms his survival. With a chilling click, his deadly blade is drawn from its sheath. The purple-haired princess is horrified to find her savior holding a bloody sword to her throat, realizing he has only returned to seek vengeance. His handsome face is twisted with a terrifying, unyielding rage. Her trembling reflection is trapped inside his cold, unforgiving eyes. She realizes that his eyes hold nothing but pure hatred for her. A grand imperial palace shines under a peaceful, clear blue sky. Chu Simyoung, the prince's page, asks the young Lord Kyungwani if he feels nervous about his upcoming appointment. The eldest son of General Kyungbek-jung stands poised and resolute. Simyoung excitedly reminds him that he is on his way to be appointed as the imperial consort. Kyungwani calmly agrees with a slight nod of acknowledgement. Simyoung playfully warns him to brace himself for what lies ahead. Simyoung warns that the princess is energetic and might be too difficult for him to handle. Kyungwani's sudden stop halts their casual conversation in the courtyard. Wani playfully retorts that she might be impossible to handle before telling Simyoung to head home safely. Wani walks away, leaving his companion behind on the stone path. Simyoung huffs in frustration, muttering about how blunt One-Eye can be. An imperial guard politely informs One-Eye that the emperor is waiting for his arrival. One-Eye privately reflects on the heavy and dangerous burden of becoming the emperor's son-in-law. He knows the ruthless emperor purged his own kin, meaning a son-in-law's life is entirely worthless to him. He walks down the grand corridors, mentally preparing for the dangerous audience. Suddenly, a pair of bright red shoes rushes frantically down the hallway. An energetic figure runs blindly around the corner, directly toward him. A wrapped bundle flies through the air as the runner trips forward. Wenny quickly catches the falling purple-haired girl in a tight embrace. He stares down in sheer confusion at the stranger in his arms. The startled purple-haired girl gasps as she realizes she has been caught. She quickly scrambles back, bowing deeply and apologizing profusely for her clumsy mistake. The frantic court guard immediately scolds her for running around so carelessly. The guard angrily bellows that she has just run into an honored guest of His Majesty. Wenny gently reassures the frightened girl and kindly asks her to stand. He kindly asks if she is hurt while looking at her. His eyes catch a fresh red scrape on her delicate palm. Without hesitation, he reaches into his robes to retrieve a clean handkerchief. The surprised girl insists such care is unnecessary, but he continues wrapping her hand. Wenny warns that untreated wounds can scar, urging her to visit a court physician immediately. She stares up at him with wide, blushing eyes, completely captivated by his kindness. The flustered girl bows quickly before turning and running away in embarrassment. Wenny is left standing in the corridor, completely bewildered by her sudden escape. He amusedly notes her immense energy as the apologetic guard begs for his forgiveness. The serene palace grounds stand quiet under the bright midday sun. Her forgotten wrapped bundle remains on the floor, a token of their meeting. Lost in deep contemplation, the purple-haired princess rests her chin on her hand, her thoughts consumed by the mysterious young warrior who captured her heart. She eagerly seeks answers, questioning Chief Court Lady Yi about the true nature of her future husband. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of curiosity, the princess wonders if all men possess the same striking presence. She reflects on how remarkably strong and robust he is, despite being only a couple of years older than her. In her comical imagination, his towering figure dwarfs her completely, leaving her in sheer awe of his physical stature. Confiding in her trusted companion, she excitedly discusses the profound impression he left on her. The wise chief court lady gently reminds her that a man's true character is revealed by how he treats those of lower status, teasing that the princess might be focusing a bit too much on his handsome looks. Amused by her mistress's shallow focus, the maid humorously transitions to examining his actual personality. The princess eagerly defends him, pointing to his selfless gesture of offering his own handkerchief as absolute proof of his noble heart. The maid playfully confronts her, reminding the princess of her earlier dramatic threats to call off the entire marriage if she didn't approve of him. Blushing, the princess tries to maintain her royal composure, admitting that while he passes the first test, she must still ensure he isn't secretly a sweet-talking skirt chaser. Panic suddenly strikes as she realizes she is running out of time to prepare for their fateful meeting. Brimming with pure joy, she rushes to get ready before his arrival, leaving her court lady smiling warmly at her obvious infatuation. Meanwhile, Wenny stands in the palace corridors, clutching his forehead as he mentally prepares for the overwhelming energetic storm awaiting him. The heavy, suffocating aura of the ruthless emperor looms large, testing the young warrior's resolve to its absolute limits. The visual shift highlights the grandeur and tension vibrating within the imperial audience hall. The emperor sternly commands Wenny to make his way to the princess's quarters without delay. Accepting the royal decree, the young lord prepares himself to face his future bride with unwavering determination. Meanwhile, inside her chambers, the princess seethes with rage, accusing her father of deliberate cruelty. Dressed in a breathtaking formal red and yellow gown, she is utterly distraught that her groom has been kept waiting for 2 painful hours. She anxiously checks her reflection in a hand mirror, fretting over the painstaking effort she spent decorating herself for their meeting. Unable to bear the agonizing suspense any longer, she decides to send a servant to investigate the delay. Suddenly catching herself as footsteps approach, she quickly dives back onto her cushions to present a picture of royal elegance. The sliding doors part, and Wenny is formally escorted into the chamber by the attending court ladies. The young lord immediately kneels in a deep, respectful bow before the sheer silk partition separating them. Speaking from behind the screen, the princess welcomes him with formal grace, bidding him to make himself at ease. An agonizing, incredibly awkward silence suddenly descends upon the room as neither of them knows how to break the ice. Sweat beads on the princess's forehead as she panics internally, wondering if he secretly despises the idea of marrying her. Terrified by the heavy silence, she anxiously questions why he spoke so freely with her father but remains completely silent with her. Caught completely off guard, the young warrior desperately stammers a polite denial, his cheeks flushing with intense nervousness. Sensing the escalating tension, Chief Court Lady Yi discreetly whispers some vital advice to her flustered mistress. The maid encourages the princess to take the initiative and steer the conversation to put him at ease. A brilliant, mischievous spark ignites in the princess's eyes as she suddenly finds the perfect way to test him. She casually mentions his heroic rescue of the clumsy apprentice court lady earlier that afternoon, catching Wenny completely off guard. He humbly downplays the incident across the dividing screen, explaining that he merely lent her a simple handkerchief. While the chief court lady glares suspiciously in the background, the princess coyly notes that every action always has a hidden motive. Blushing, she teasingly asks if his kind rescue was motivated by the girl's pretty face. Flustered and defensive, One Eye quickly replies that the girl was practically a child, insisting he is not shameless enough to harbor such thoughts. Hearing herself referred to as a mere child, the princess clenches her fist in sudden outraged offense. Her eyes blaze with competitive pride as she demands to know if he truly felt absolutely nothing upon seeing her beauty. As she prepares to stand, he honest-to-goodness admits that he didn't even look at her face during the chaotic encounter. The young lord looks up in sheer bewilderment as the silhouette behind the screen suddenly moves. With a dramatic flourish, the princess steps forward and parts the hanging curtain, revealing her true identity in all her royal glory. Wanie's jaw drops, and a massive blush paints his face as the startling truth crashes down upon him. Standing proudly amidst a cascade of flowers, the beautiful princess stares down at her thoroughly stunned groom. Completely spellbound, the young warrior can only gaze up at her in breathless admiration as his heart skips a beat. The screen transitions as the narrative pauses briefly to acknowledge the creators behind this epic tale. Under the quiet, moonlit night sky, One Eye sits alone in the courtyard, his mind swirling with the day's unforgettable events. He suddenly leaps to his feet as a familiar voice calls out to him, revealing his father standing in the shadows. General Baekjung steps forward with a knowing smile, explaining that he stopped by to check on his son after his long and fateful day at the palace. With the weight of the entire empire hanging in the balance, a legendary warrior's dark legacy is finally unveiled. Meeting in the quiet courtyard, the young warrior confirms his high-stakes audience with the emperor and princess to his father. The concerned general notes his son's exhausted appearance, sensing the immense mental toll of the royal encounter. Reflecting on the ruthless emperor's deeply suspicious nature, the father remembers the dangerous environment his son just survived. Closed eyes and a heavy sigh reveal the father's deep-seated regret over his son being forced into the imperial family. Offering a comforting hand on his shoulder, the father gently urges his exhausted son to finally head inside and rest. Looking away with a troubled expression, the young lord admits his restless mind forced him outside to clear his thoughts. A sudden realization strikes the father, his eyes widening as he suspects something unexpected happened during the meeting. Startled by his father's sudden reaction, the young warrior looks up in utter surprise. Under the quiet glow of the night sky, the father listens intently to his son's confession. Sitting together on a wooden bench, the amused general pieces together how his son panicked and fled the princess's chambers. The young lord vividly remembers the furious purple-haired princess demanding her servants escort him out of her sight. Turning his head in deep frustration, the confused young warrior laments his inability to understand what he did wrong. The silent archery targets in the courtyard stand under the dark sky, mirroring his internal conflict. The father listens closely, preparing to impart his own wisdom on handling the princess's temper. The young warrior looks up in bewilderment, questioning his father's mysterious solution. Driven by determination, his hand carefully guides a calligraphy brush over paper by the warm glow of a lamp. From outside the lit window, an observer watches the young lord's silhouette diligently writing late into the night. Kneeling before the general, a servant reports that the young master is completely absorbed in writing his letter. Satisfied with the news, the general graciously dismisses the servant to rest for the night. Standing alone under the starlit sky, the father looks up at the bright full moon in quiet contemplation. Seeing the discarded bow and arrows, the general realizes what his son was truly working on. Sitting together once more, the father amusingly shares how he used to write love letters to win over his own wife. The young warrior looks skeptical, asking if a simple letter can truly fix the massive misunderstanding. With a knowing smile, the father asks if his future daughter-in-law is truly as stunning as rumored. Blushing deeply, the young lord looks down and quietly confirms her mesmerizing beauty. Looking up at the clear night sky, the father questions if she is as breathtaking as the moonlight. Surrounded by a beautiful vision of blue flowers, the young lord proudly declares her beauty completely outshines the moon. The general smiles warmly, surprised to see his sword-obsessed son completely captivated by love. Meanwhile, a pair of white shoes rushes frantically across the polished floor of the imperial chambers. Sitting before a magnificent dragon screen, the imposing emperor welcomes his daughter and questions her late-night arrival. Kneeling on the floor, the distraught princess faces her father as he notes she should have been asleep hours ago. Looking down with tears in her eyes, the princess confesses her heart is completely broken after her meeting with the young lord. Outraged by her distress, the emperor flexes his arm in a fury, vowing to summon the young warrior and punish him. The princess panics, quickly raising her hands to stop her father's aggressive response. Clenching her fists, she complains that the young lord was unbearably cold and completely indifferent to her beauty. The emperor's protective instincts flare up as he threatens to call off the entire imperial engagement immediately. Desperately grabbing her father's yellow sleeve, the princess begs him to halt his rash decision. Looking worried, she reasons that breaking the engagement would ruin the young lord's future reputation and marriage prospects. Faking a dramatic cough into her sleeve, she magnanimously claims she will overlook his behavior just this once. Seeing right through her excuse, the emperor strokes his beard with an amused, knowing smile. Holding her chest in a comical sigh of relief, the princess is glad she successfully managed her father's temper. The emperor reflects silently, knowing his daughter's dramatic temperament means she silently harbors deep feelings for the young man. The quiet morning sun rises over the beautiful traditional architecture of the princess's imperial residence. Inside her chambers, the miserable princess lies completely slumped on her bed, groaning in dramatic despair. Suddenly, her brown-haired court lady enters holding a yellow envelope announcing a letter has arrived from the young lord. Instantly re-energized, the princess sits up with wide, excited eyes and demands the letter be brought to her immediately. Her hands tremble with anticipation as she carefully slides the folded yellow parchment out of its envelope. Holding the golden paper in front of her face, she eagerly unfolds it to read his written words. Over a vision of the young lord writing, his letter sincerely apologizes for his clumsy behavior and boldly confesses his true feelings. Clutching the precious letter in her hands, the purple-haired princess stands completely frozen as she prepares to face the young lord's deepest secrets. Sensing her mistress's intense hesitation, the loyal maid eagerly prompts her to reveal the contents of the mysterious letter. A deep, unmistakable blush washes over her face as she shyly confesses that he has sent her a genuine love letter. The sudden revelation leaves the maid absolutely stunned, her eyes widening in utter disbelief at the young warrior's boldness. Giddy with overwhelming joy, the princess's eyes sparkle as she basks in the warmth of his unexpected affection. Overjoyed, she comically spins around the chamber, clutching the parchment to her chest while her maid watches in sheer bewilderment. Holding the precious parchment tightly against her heart, her face lights up with a radiant, blissful smile. This single letter bridges the distance between them, connecting the earnest young warrior's quiet reflections with her heart. Autumn leaves drift past the palace doors as several months fly by, signaling the arrival of a brand new season. Preparing for a momentous reunion, her attentive maid carefully helps her dress in her finest, most elegant royal robes. She eagerly approves the final touches, her excitement building as she prepares to see him once again. Turning to her mirror, she anxiously questions if she has finally outgrown her childish appearance. Her maid reassuringly reminds her of the daily herbal remedies she has faithfully taken to aid her physical growth. Looking at her elegant figure, the maid admires how beautifully her mistress has matured over the past few months. A confident smile graces the princess's lips as the maid playfully predicts the young lord's inevitable astonishment upon seeing her. Stepping gracefully over the threshold, she ventures out to find her awaiting groom. Just outside, the young lord stands in his majestic blue robes, gazing out at the vast sky. She quietly sneaks up behind him, her floral slippers making absolutely no sound on the wooden floor. With a mischievous gleam in her eye, she gently reaches out to tap his shoulder. Startled, the young warrior quickly turns around, only to realize who has approached him. She strikes a radiant pose with a dramatic flourish, confidently showcasing her breathtaking transformation. Completely spellbound, his face flushes crimson as he struggles to find his breath in her presence. She coyly asks if he still dares to view her as nothing more than a mere child. Flustered and completely overwhelmed, the young lord desperately stammers in his own defense. Soft laughter echoes through the courtyard as the two share a tender, long-awaited moment under the falling autumn leaves. Meanwhile, inside the military quarters, two veterans clink their cups together to toast to the upcoming campaign. Minister Chu Seg lamentingly notes that their official imperial duties leave them precious little time for friendly leisure. General Baekjong agrees, noting that men of their high standing have no luxury to remain idle in times of crisis. The atmosphere shifts to a somber note as they discuss the dangerous rebellion that has plagued the realm for over a year. The minister warns that their upcoming quest to suppress the cult means they won't meet again for a very long time. Chu Seg then questions the young lord's sudden absence, prompting the general to suggest his son's current whereabouts. When the minister correctly guesses his son is with the princess, the general is caught completely off guard. Smiling, Chu Seg explains that the entire capital is already buzzing with rumors of the young couple's close bond. A heavy, contemplative silence falls over General Baekjong as he absorbs the weight of his old friend's words. His hands begin to tremble slightly as deep-seated anxieties about the imperial engagement creep back into his mind. Lost in thought, the general's grip slips, causing a few drops of his tea to splash over the rim. He quickly brushes off his sudden clumsiness, insisting that he has absolutely nothing to worry about. Skeptical of his friend's forced composure, Chu Seg questions the clear signs of distress written all over his face. With a knowing smirk behind his cup, the minister probes deeper to uncover the source of the general's unease. He asks if the general's anxiety stems from the emperor's refusal to set a formal date for the wedding. Laughing it off, the general teases his friend's intuition, while Chu Seg reassures him of the emperor's deep affection for his daughter. They share a mutual understanding of a protective father's natural reluctance to easily give his daughter away. Yet, remembering the ruthless emperor's volatile nature, the general secretly fears his young son's inexperience might trigger imperial wrath. The minister dismisses his worries, pointing out that any father would dream of having 3 outstanding sons like his own. However, a dark shadow crosses the general's face as he bitterly realizes his other son's talents can never compare to his youngest. Forcing a jovial laugh, he attempts to mask his inner turmoil from his observing companion. Under the glowing sunset sky, they share a lighter moment, reflecting on their children's bright but uncertain futures. As nightfall descends, a quiet serenity blankets the grand, illuminated spires of the imperial palace. At the edge of the silent lotus pond, the young couple stands together in quiet contemplation. Looking up at him with genuine concern in her eyes, she softly questions how long the upcoming campaign will keep them apart. As the looming threat of war casts a dark shadow, the princess anxiously asks her beloved if the upcoming campaign will keep them apart for a long time. Standing high upon the pavilion, the young lord gently questions her underlying fear. He firmly promises to do everything in his power to return to her side as quickly as possible. Looking up with tearful eyes, she begs him to return home safely without a single scratch. With a tender smile, the young lord solemnly pledges to keep himself safe for her sake. The princess insists on a pinky promise to seal his vow of returning unharmed. Their pinky fingers lock, sealing a silent and unbreakable promise under the twilight sky. The princess gasps in sudden shock as the atmosphere between them shifts instantly. Without a word, the young lord gently but firmly takes her hand in his. He leans down, bringing her hand to his lips for a soft, breathtaking kiss. A gentle blush creeps onto his face as he gazes at her with pure devotion. Overcome with intense emotion, the princess's face turns a deep, burning crimson. She suddenly loses her balance as her legs completely give out beneath her. He swiftly catches her, dipping her in a smooth, dramatic embrace. While he asks if she is hurt, she flusteredly blames her sudden clumsiness on her weak legs. A quiet, knowing smile plays on his lips as autumn leaves drift around them. Seizing the tender moment, he asks her to make a promise of her own. Blushing softly, he requests that she think of him at least once every single day he is gone. The princess's eyes widen in sheer disbelief at his incredibly bold romantic demand. Embracing her tightly, he vows that even in the mud of battle, he will bloom for her. The scene shifts violently to the burning stronghold of the Baekdu cult where Imperial forces launch their assault. Imperial soldiers charge into the blazing chaos, slaughtering the cultists with fierce battle cries. Facing the invading army, the cult leader mockingly asks if his death will truly end their suffering. The cult leader decries the emperor's hypocrisy, comparing his peaceful path to the ruler's bloody history. He defiantly dares the young lord to step forward and claim his head. With a crazed look, he warns that the desperate masses will only beg for a savior once more. The young warrior's hand grips his sword hilt, ready to deliver swift justice. With lethal speed, his blade flashes through the air, carving a bloody path. A final precise slash of his sword cuts cleanly through the dark room. The cult leader's veiled head falls to the floor with a hollow thud. Lord Kyung stands victorious in the silent, blood-soaked chamber. A quiet, dark transition panel signals the end of the brutal raid. Kyung finally closes his eyes, exhaling a quiet sigh of relief. He envisions the radiant, smiling face of his princess, finding peace in her memory. Outside the burning pagoda, a soldier triumphantly announces that Kyung has slain the cult leader. Inside the palace, the victorious soldiers celebrate their monumental triumph with a joyous banquet. Prince Niang, the emperor's youngest brother, personally pours a drink for the young hero. Kyung politely accepts the cup, expressing his sincere gratitude to the prince. The prince highly praises Kyung's vastly improved swordsmanship during this harsh campaign. Playfully, the prince laments that he cannot marry his own daughter to Kyung due to the princess. He urges that the emperor must marry the young couple quickly to end his envy. He raises a final toast to their eternal bond just as Kyung's voice calls out from a distant door. The scene transitions to the quiet night sky, dominated by a brilliant full moon. Pale moonlight filters through the dark silhouettes of rustling tree pandas. Inside his dark chambers, General Beijong is suddenly awakened by a quiet knock at the door. Standing behind the paper screen, Kyung uses a coded phrase to identify himself to his father. Recognizing his son's voice, the general looks surprised but quickly bids him to enter. The general welcomes his son, questioning what brings him home so late at night. Kyung steps inside wearing an incredibly serious and tense expression. He asks his father what he truly thinks of Prince Neong, as a dark and bloody vision of the prince's impending doom flashes through his mind. Tension reaches a boiling point as Kyung stands before his father, preparing to drop a massive political bombshell. He directly questions his father's true opinion of Prince Neong, while a dark and bloody vision of violent conflict flashes in his mind. Taken completely off guard, General Beijong demands to know what his son could possibly mean by such a heavy question. Kyung's focused gaze narrows as he explains that something has been deeply bothering him during his 3-month stay. He notes that while the local soldiers can barely hold their formations or properly grip their swords, the high-ranking generals commanding them seem to be intentionally hiding their formidable skills from the public eye. Kyung recalls watching their precise combat movements, realizing that their advanced swordsmanship is far from ordinary. The general's face tightens with dread as he asks his son what he is ultimately trying to say. Kyung delivers a bombshell, revealing that Prince Nyang has been secretly building an elite hidden military force right under the emperor's nose. Deeply unsettled by the revelation, the general asks his son what he makes of this dangerous treason. Kyung contemplates the situation, wondering what desperate measures he would have taken if he were in the prince's precarious position. A bloody vision of a red-haired warrior standing victoriously over fallen foes highlights the high stakes of their discussion. In a heart-wrenching flashback, the young prince weeps in absolute terror of the volatile emperor's sudden executions. Chased by massive, menacing red eyes of surveillance, the young prince spent his entire life desperately running just to survive. Kyung looks on with deep empathy, realizing the prince only chose this dangerous path of rebellion out of a desperate struggle for survival. Determined to protect the prince, Kyung firmly declares to his shocked father that he has no intention of reporting this to the emperor. Respecting his son's compassionate wisdom, General Baekjong solemnly agrees to keep the secret safe as well. A warm smile of pure relief breaks across Kyung's face as he sincerely thanks his father for his trust. Meanwhile, the scene transitions to a beautifully arranged octagonal tray filled with colorful traditional sweets. The princess leans in close, her eyes shining with absolute delight as she asks if they are ginseng sweets. General Baekjong's elegant wife, Lady Jong, warmly introduces herself and notes she heard the princess had been feeling unwell. Beside her, Kyung Won-young blushes sweetly, modestly offering the handmade treats she prepared to help her highness recover. The three women share a serene, bonding moment around the low wooden table, temporarily forgetting the looming threat of war. Looking adorable in chibi form, the princess politely asks if she may try one of the exquisite sweets. Beaming with joy, the two women immediately give her their enthusiastic permission. The princess reaches out with a graceful hand, carefully selecting a perfectly crafted sweet from the wooden tray. Delight fills her face as the sweet melts in her mouth, prompting a relieved smile from Lady Jang. Recognizing the princess's underlying loneliness, Kyung Won-young gently clasps her hand in a warm, comforting hold. Won-young softly reassures the princess, sharing how deeply worried her brother Kyung has been about her highness's well-being. The princess is deeply touched, feeling an incredible warmth as if they were her very own mother and sister. Respectfully addressing her as Lady Soguk, Lady Jang praises the princess's admirable strength and character. Yet, looking down somberly, the princess wonders how Lady Jang coped with years of waiting for her husband when she can barely endure 3 months. With a gentle, knowing smile, Lady Jang reveals that she survived the long years solely because of her absolute faith in her husband. A poignant flashback shows a young Lady Jang weeping in torment, unable to sleep or eat while the general was away on campaign. Her expression softens with nostalgic warmth as she reflects on the immense trials she overcame through love. A beautiful silhouette under the starlit sky highlights her enduring conviction that her beloved would always return to her embrace. Lady Jang explains that just as she constantly worried for him, she knew her husband was carrying her in his heart as well. She advises the princess that her true duty is to patiently wait and greet her husband with a radiant smile when he finally comes home. Overcome with emotion, the princess gasps softly as Lady Jang's profound words wash away her deepest anxieties. A new morning dawns over the peaceful spires of the royal palace, bathed in warm golden sunlight. Inside her sunlit chambers, the princess holds a long, beautifully written letter from her beloved warrior. She reads the letter with a tender, nostalgic smile, finding immense comfort in his written words. Her playful maid chuckles softly, teasing her mistress about how many times she has already read the letter today. The maid asks if she is truly that happy, and the princess blushes intensely while enthusiastically confirming her absolute joy. The princess gently strokes the ink on the paper, holding the letter close to her heart as she misses him. Suddenly, a servant bursts into the room in a comedic chibi panic, announcing that Lord Kyung has finally returned. Gasping in complete shock, the princess immediately orders her servants to show him in at once. Just outside the sliding door, a nervous Kyung takes a deep breath and quickly adjusts his collar. The young warrior stands tall, his handsome features filled with nervous anticipation as he prepares to see his beloved. As the door finally slides open, her ecstatic voice echoes through the room, eagerly welcoming her long-awaited hero back home. Kyung gasps in utter shock as the princess throws her arms around him. Overwhelmed with emotion, the crying princess lets out a soft, trembling sob. Kyung notices her weight loss while she tearfully admits her constant worry. They hold each other closely under the gentle gaze of a maid. Time stands still as they remain locked in a quiet, tender embrace. With ultimate gentleness, his hand caresses her tear-stained cheek. Golden-eyed and crying, she softly confesses she is lost without him. He tenderly brushes a strand of hair behind her ear, soothing her. Spotting a scratch on his wrist, the princess panics in chibi for. He sheepishly downplays the small arrow grace to ease her worries. Blushing, he begs for her forgiveness, admitting he rushed back for her. Hearing he returned 5 days early, she learns he rode ahead alone. Unable to resist any longer, he pulls her into a passionate kiss. Flushed with love, she playfully tells him to accept her sudden kiss. Kyung teasingly suggests that a kiss is far too light a punishment. Pulling her closer, his grip tightens around her waist with fierce passion. He seals his playful threat with another deep, breathtaking kiss. She responds eagerly, her hand wrapping gently around the back of his neck. Surrounded by blooming flowers, the lovers celebrate their long-awaited reunion. The sunlit chamber bears silent witness to their beautiful, unbroken bond. Meanwhile, a sudden heavy cough echoes through a dark royal chamber. The ailing emperor desperately tries to stifle his violent coughing fits. Staring at a blood-stained handkerchief, the emperor vows to survive until year's end. The emperor secretly asks his trusted minister about any unusual palace happenings. The official reports that Kyung returned early to visit the princess. Despite the official praising their closeness, the emperor remains deeply suspicious. The emperor mentally warns that the princess must never touch court politics. The monarch frets over the sheer weakness of his own crown prince. Clenching his fist, he resolves to trust the princess's strategic marriage. The emperor commands the immediate establishment of the Royal Wedding Bureau. A shift in destiny begins to unravel as imperial power structures move behind closed doors. Joyous congratulations echo through the sunny courtyard as plans move forward. She gushes over his top exam scores while he modestly deflects. Her praise is suddenly cut short as she spots a familiar tree. She recognizes the very cypress tree where her childhood kite was trapped. He wonders how she could possibly know about that distant memory. She reveals his sister told her about his brave rescue attempt. He remembers making her cry but is clueless about what followed next. Utterly baffled, Kyung asks what could have possibly happened after that. She explains that he had secretly left a handmade kite on her pillow. Even now, she still keeps his precious handmade gift close to her heart. A nostalgic smile spreads as she recalls his childhood kindness. Embarrassed, Kyung sheepishly admits he had completely forgotten his childhood gesture. She dreams of their future children playing here, asking him to guide her. Hearing her mention their future children, Kyung blushes in pure shock. She eagerly holds his hand, asking to see his personal quarters next. Her radiant, beautiful smile melts away his remaining nervousness completely. Entering his neat room, she lets out a delighted squeal of excitement. In adorable chibi form, she eagerly explores every corner of his room. Suddenly, she gasps, her golden eyes locking onto a mysterious object. A massive secret begins to unravel as the young princess stares up at a beautifully hung scroll. The ancient scroll hangs in the quiet room, holding a mystery that could change everything. Pointing directly at the calligraphy, the princess questions if General Kyung himself wrote the words of absolute loyalty. Stepping closer with an innocent expression, Kyung playfully asks if the handwriting does not look like his own work. With unwavering certainty, the princess points out that the elegant handwriting is definitely not his. Caught red-handed, Kyung falls into a stunned silence as he struggles to find an excuse. Sensing his sudden discomfort, the princess immediately backs down and apologizes for pressing him so hard. Blushing warmly, Kyung gently assures her that he has absolutely nothing to hide from his beloved. The princess gasps in surprise, her heart fluttering at his sincere and affectionate declaration. Suddenly alert, Kyung glances toward the doorway as if sensing a lurking presence. Just outside the sliding doors, a pair of maids stand guard to ensure their private meeting remains uninterrupted.
Turning back to her, Kyung takes a deep breath and decides to finally reveal the truth behind the mysterious scroll.
Her golden eyes widen in absolute shock as he reveals that the calligraphy was penned by none other than the legendary enemy general Kang Wan. Terrified by the dangerous revelation, she asks how they could possess something from the very nation they were recently fighting. Touching the scroll with reverence, she demands to know how such a treasonous item ended up in his household. With a somber expression, Kyung prepares to delve into a deeply personal history involving his father and a respected rival. A dramatic flashback shows General Kang Wan clashing swords in a fierce, respectful duel against Kyung's father on the battlefield. Standing back to back amidst the flames of war, the two opposing commanders forged an unspoken bond of mutual respect. On the day of the peace treaty, they shared a quiet drink together, feeling more like old friends than bitter enemies. However, tragedy struck when war erupted once more, claiming the life of General Kang Wan's beloved only son. Discovering the boy's remains on the chaotic battlefield, Kyung's father ensured he received a proper burial before returning his body home. Deeply moved by the honorable gesture, the grieving enemy general sent back a precious short sword and a final heartfelt letter. Kyung explains that although they never met again, his father kept the sacred short sword close as a symbol of their bond. The princess is seized with dread, realizing that keeping an enemy general's possessions is a death sentence in the imperial court. A terrifying vision of the scroll engulfed in flames underscores the fatal consequences if their political enemies ever discover this secret. Yet, looking at his earnest face, she resolves to keep the secret safe, unable to break the beautiful bond forged in war. Filled with gratitude for his absolute honesty, she softly asks how she can possibly repay his profound trust. With unmatched tenderness, Kyung gently covers her mouth and assures her that her mere presence is all he needs. Locking eyes under a canopy of imaginary blossoms, the couple shares a quiet, breathtaking moment of pure devotion. Whispering that her love is more than enough, Kyung leans in and steals another soft, romantic kiss. Wrapped in a passionate embrace, the lovers completely lose themselves in their shared affection, oblivious to the outside world. Meanwhile, the sun sets in a brilliant blaze of orange over the sprawling, silent courtyards of the imperial palace. Inside a luxurious chamber, the lazy crown prince Yu Jong lounges with an open robe, muttering about Kyung's top scores. Pouring another cup of wine, his blonde companion confirms that the rumors are indeed true. The prince sneers in bitter resentment, recounting how his own father wishes his sister had been born a son instead. Slumped over his seat, the frustrated prince drowns his deep-seated insecurities in endless cups of alcohol. Clutching his head, the prince bitterly complains that he never chose to be born with such heavy burdens. His blonde companion offers a soothing smile, politely urging him to let go of his troubles and have another drink. Behind the scenes, a sinister official clenches his fist in a red-tinted backdrop, plotting to control the throne through the prince's weakness. A chilling close-up reveals the blonde companion's deceptive smile as he resolves to keep the prince weak and easily manipulated. Suddenly, the door slides open as a beautiful dark-haired woman clad in red robes enters the room to join them. The blonde companion turns his head in sudden surprise, a nervous blush creeping up his cheeks. The woman instantly throws her arms around the half-naked prince, teasing him for being awake so early. Ignoring his companion entirely, the prince takes another slow sip of wine while holding the seductive woman close. Glancing back over his purple cloak, the blonde companion watches the intimate scene unfold with a mixture of disgust and hidden panic. Stepping out of the room, he quietly slides the wooden door shut to give the two lovers their privacy. His eyes widen in sudden shock as a dark realization crosses his mind. From a high angle, the companion lingers near the door, spying on the passionate encounter happening just inside. The prince pulls the seductive woman close, sealing his escape from reality with a deep, passionate kiss. Locked in a scandalous embrace, the crown prince remains oblivious to the dangerous political puppet masters pulling his strings from the shadows. Eavesdropping from the shadows, the blonde-haired page overhears a shocking secret about the crown prince's plan to escape. Stunned by the whispers beyond the door, he struggles to believe his own ears. Standing frozen in the dark corridor, his feet are rooted to the floor in absolute panic. Listening closer, he is horrified to recognize a forbidden cult's dark incantation echoing from the room. A sudden sharp inquiry from inside cuts through the silence of the night. Inside the chamber, the brown-haired official, Chu Segu, reacts with absolute fury to the terrifying news. Trembling with fear, the young page desperately begs his father to keep his voice down. Clenching his jaw, Chu Segu demands to know if there is any doubt about this heresy. The young page confirms with absolute certainty that it was indeed a forbidden cult spell. Blushing deeply, the page explains the taboo and scandalous nature of the spell's secret purpose. Chu Segu clutches his head, utterly appalled by the crown prince's dangerous association. A vivid, surreal vision depicts the cultists' deceptive promises of salvation masking a den of pure depravity. The anxious page warns that if the emperor catches wind of this, absolute ruin awaits them. Chu Segu grimly points out that the crown prince will undoubtedly be stripped of his title. Sitting in the dim light, they realize the political fallout will drag down their entire lineage. With a terrifying glare, Chu Segu warns that the entire clan could face execution. Desperation takes hold of the young page as he begs for a way out of this trap. Chu Segu rubs his temple, his mind racing to find a loophole to save them. He reflects on the deteriorating health of the terminally ill emperor. Resolving to act swiftly, he knows they must cover their tracks before the monarch discovers the truth. A dark resolve takes root as he decides they must frame a scapegoat to survive. Chu Sebu's eyes narrow with cold, calculated malice as he hatches a treacherous plan. Reaching across his desk, he slides a secret intelligence document into view. Later that night, Chu Segu meets with a dark-clothed spy to discuss the princess's activities. The spy details how a palace servant witnessed the princess meeting privately with Kyung. Stroking his beard, Chu Segu assumes the secret meeting was a cover for a political alliance. The spy reports that no further details of their conversation have been recovered. Chu Segu quietly reaches into a hidden wooden drawer to retrieve a reward. He places a heavy pouch of gold on the table, praising the spy's work. Smiling greedily, the informant pockets the bribe and bows out of the room. Left alone, Chu Segu realizes the Kyung family is the perfect sacrificial lamb to distract the court. He bitterly reflects on how his son's insecurities only grow in the shadow of his talented rival. Suddenly, a delicate silhouette appears on the sliding door as his daughter Nayoung requests entry. Softening his expression, the cunning official warmly invites his daughter inside. He gently questions why she is awake so late in the evening. Chu Nayoung, the youngest daughter of the clan, confesses her deep anxiety kept her from sleeping. She offers a sweet, humble smile, playing the part of a naive daughter. Chu Segu sighs, admitting that he is currently torn between two dangerous paths. He describes the agony of choosing between passive submission or a high-stakes political gamble. Nayoung listens with a serene, knowing smile that belies her young age. Laughing it off, Chu Segu dismisses his worries, telling her to focus only on her jewelry. Her eyes narrow coldly as she drops a chillingly pragmatic truth about the price of survival. Stunned by her sudden, dark wisdom, Chu Segu flinches in absolute disbelief. Surrounded by a backdrop of dark, beautiful roses, Nayoung's true, manipulative nature begins to show. She poses a metaphorical riddle about how a helpless rabbit can survive a tiger's hunt. Sweating under her intense gaze, her father asks what trick the rabbit must play. An ink illustration depicts the rabbit surviving by luring its enemy, the weasel, to the tiger instead. She calmly explains that the sacrifice guarantees the rabbit's immediate safety. With a cold smirk, she points out that it also conveniently destroys a future enemy in one stroke. Chu Segu is left utterly dumbfounded, realizing his own daughter possesses a mind far more ruthless than his own. Chu Segu is deeply chilled by how easily his cunning daughter Nayoung sees through his innermost thoughts. A sinister glint shines in Nayoung's cold purple eyes as she plans her next move. Pointing out the Emperor's terminal illness, Nayoung asks what their next strategic move should be. She suggests they can either hide their disgraceful secrets until the sovereign finally passes away, or she hints at taking far more drastic measures before the truth ever reaches his eyes. With a terrifying smile, she urges her father not to hesitate in framing their rival without dirtying their own hands. Highly impressed by her dark wisdom, Chusugu praises his daughter while she humbly plays her innocent role. Slapping her hands down in a sudden fit of rage, her polite mask completely shatters. Her bitter thoughts echo with a dark promise that if she cannot have him, no one will. Nan screams in a toxic fury, determined to destroy her beloved rather than let anyone else have him. Her face twists in manic malice as she resolves to crush her rival, no matter who they are. A peaceful memory shows the purple-haired princess and Kyung sharing a tender moment beneath falling blossoms. A few days later, a beautiful full moon rises over the quiet imperial palace. Quietly sitting in her chambers, the princess carefully focuses on her delicate embroidery. She warmly remembers Kyung explaining that his mother hand-sewed the robe he wears. He fondly smiled, declaring he would cherish the robe until it finally wore out. Suddenly, she accidentally pricks her finger with the sharp needle, letting out a soft cry. Gasping in sudden surprise, she stares down at her injured finger in shock. A single drop of crimson blood stains the embroidered tiger, signaling a dark omen. The princess is suddenly seized with an overwhelming sensation of heavy dread in her chest. Suddenly, a guard's panicked shouts shatter the silence of the night. Her terrified maid rushes into the room to warn her that something truly catastrophic has occurred. The princess freezes in absolute horror upon hearing that Kyung's father has been arrested for treason. Fiercely declaring the general's innocence, she bolts toward the exit to find her father. She desperately resolves to appeal directly to the emperor to clear the general's name. Abruptly, cross swords block her path, cutting off her escape. The guard firmly informs her that an imperial decree forbids her from leaving her palace. Surrounded by armed soldiers, the helpless princess realizes she is trapped inside her own home. She furiously orders them to move, but the guards refuse, stating they are only obeying the sovereign's commands. Her desperate maids hold her back as she struggles wildly to break past the guards. Her agonizing cries for her father's mercy echo uselessly across the dark palace rooftops. Collapsing to the floor, she desperately weeps as the grim reality of the situation sets in. Overwhelmed by absolute helplessness, she screams out in agonizing despair for those she loves. Deep inside a dark dungeon, the bound general is brutally tortured by ruthless imperial guards. The general lets out an agonizing groan as they mercilessly crush his legs with wooden beams. Sweat and tears pour down his face as he desperately struggles to survive the excruciating torture. A blood-curdling scream of pure agony echoes through the pitch-black halls of the dungeon. The terrifying nightmare suddenly shatters, shifting back to the quiet reality of her chambers. The princess abruptly snaps her eyes open, tears pouring down her face as she wakes up. Gasping for breath, she sits up in bed, trembling from the horrific vision. Her worried maid sits by her side, relieved that she is finally awakened from her sleep. Driven by pure panic, the princess insists she must go to Lord Kyung immediately. The maid quickly restrains her, warning her that she is far too weak to move. Chief Court Lady Yi desperately begs her to stay calm and rest for her own safety. The princess weeps, shouting that it is impossible to remain calm during such a crisis. The loyal maid looks on with deep sorrow and concern for her beloved mistress. Tightly grasping the maid's hands, the princess begs for her loyal support. She desperately pleads for any information regarding the fate of Lord Kyung and the general. Tears well up in the maid's eyes as she struggles to find the words to respond. Stealing her resolve, the maid slowly begins to reveal the tragic events that transpired during her sleep. As a blood-red sky blankets the imperial capital, rumors of a shocking betrayal begin to circulate among the palace guards. Heavily armed soldiers suddenly storm the general's quarters, acting on a devastating report of illegal foreign collusion. The entire estate is sealed in an instant, and both the loyal general and his son are ruthlessly dragged away in chains. Back in her chambers, Princess Sukjong clutches her head in absolute shock as the horrific news is delivered. Knowing a treason charge spells certain death, she frantically demands writing materials to draft an immediate appeal. Ignoring her maid's terror, the princess desperately prepares to demand a face-to-face audience with her imperial father. She steels her fragile heart, fiercely swearing to fight through this nightmare to save the family she loves. Meanwhile, deep within the private sovereign chambers, a loyal eunuch receives a tense command from the crown. The terminally ill emperor sits on his throne, coughing violently as his physical strength rapidly drains away. Clutching his throat, the dying sovereign wheezes bitterly, relieved to have supposedly uncovered the general's hidden treachery. He clenches his fist in absolute fury, disgusted that he nearly married his beloved daughter into a traitorous clan. When the eunuch announces the princess's urgent arrival, the furious monarch coldly commands her to enter. Stepping past the sliding doors, the princess enters the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of the imperial chamber. She prostrates herself on the cold floor, passionately declaring that her heart already belongs to Wanai as his wife. She begs her father for mercy, refusing to stand idly by while her chosen partner stands on the brink of absolute ruin. Weeping bitterly, she asks how she could ever abandon the family that means everything to her. Bowing low, she desperately defends the general's lifelong loyalty, pleading with her father to see past the lies. The emperor's face twists in dark anger as he grimly counters that undeniable proof has already been unearthed. Her heart completely shatters as the devastating mention of evidence leaves her utterly speechless. He reveals that investigators discovered damning proof of illegal collusion hidden directly within the general's private estate. The emperor explains that the recovered weapon is forged from a highly restricted foreign black iron. He holds up the forbidden dagger, noting the metal is strictly mined within hostile enemy territory. Drawing the weapon, he reveals an inscription directly linking the blade to the enemy's notorious high general. Paralyzed with horror, the princess realizes there is no logical defense to protect her beloved from this perfect frame-up. She stammers in absolute despair while her father looks down with a mixture of cold pity and disappointment. Turning his back, the emperor issues a heartless ultimatum demanding she sever all ties with Wanai immediately. His voice drops to a threatening whisper, warning her of the severe consequences of defying his imperial decree. He coldly warns that mentioning Wanai's name again will only hasten his execution, leaving her trembling in terror. An absolute imperial ban is officially declared, forbidding any contact with the disgraced Kyong family under penalty of death. Turning away completely, the emperor commands his guards to escort the heartbroken princess back to her palace. She struggles wildly against the soldier's iron grip, screaming desperately for her father to show mercy. Her agonizing cries echo uselessly through the dark, cold hallways of the imperial palace. Meanwhile, the dark conspiracy deepens as the focus shifts to the putrid depths of the imperial dungeon. Under the cover of night, Chu Sigu quietly watches his servant hand a heavy bribe to the prison guards. Pocketing the coin pouch, the corrupted guard looks around suspiciously to ensure no one is watching. The guard silently unlocks the heavy iron-reinforced door, letting the official step into the dark corridor. Covering his nose, Chu Sigu mutters in disgust at the suffocating, deathly stench filling the prison. Deep inside the cell, a battered, bloody figure lies motionless on the damp straw floor. Chu Sigu swallows hard, his expression tightening with a mixture of anxiety and grim determination. He approaches the iron bars, urgently calling out to General Kyong Baekjong to wake up. The heavily wounded general slowly lifts his head, weakly recognizing Chu Sigu through the dim blue light. Chu Sigu desperately urges the broken general to endure, promising that he will find a way to clear his name. The weak general begs him to stay out of this dangerous mess to avoid dragging himself down as well. Suddenly, the heavy sound of dragging footsteps echoes as guards drag in another battered prisoner. A sharp shout cuts through the silence of the dungeon corridor as the guards approach the cell. A close-up reveals Wanai's face covered in severe bruises and fresh blood from senseless torture. Seeing his broken son, the devastated general grips the iron bars and cries out in agonizing despair. The brutal guards mercilessly toss the bloody young lord into the adjacent cell. Knowing his time is short, Chu Sigu whispers a hasty promise to return before quickly slipping away. Turning his back on the weeping father and son, Chu Sigu walks away, carrying the heavy weight of his dark secrets. Trapped behind bars, the battered general lets out a weak, painful groan. Weeping bitterly behind the cold iron bars, the blue-haired general laments his absolute failure as a protective father. Stepping away, the brown-haired official in red robes mutters in relief that his own son is in that cell instead of him. Walking down the quiet, dimly lit corridor, the official leaves the tragic scene behind. Brought before the throne, the bloodied and bound general desperately accepts full responsibility for his disgraceful failure. Pressing his bruised face to the cold floor, the broken general confesses to foreign collusion and begs for immediate execution. Looking down coldly, the blue-haired emperor bitterly notes that his former loyal general has finally confessed to the treason. An absolute imperial decree orders the immediate beheading of the general and his son, sentencing their family to government slavery. Prostrated and weeping, the purple-haired princess passionately defends the general's family and their lifelong, unwavering loyalty to the crown. Throwing herself at his feet, the desperate princess begs her father to reconsider his ruthless sentence. Suddenly, a guard frantically bursts into the throne room, interrupting the tense standoff as the emperor demands to know what is happening. Kneeling in terror, the guard reports that the general has taken his own life inside his prison cell. The guard adds that amidst the ensuing chaos, the general's son broke out of his cell and successfully escaped. Grinding his teeth in explosive fury, the emperor curses the traitors for defying him to the bitter end. A supreme command is instantly issued to hunt down and apprehend the escaped fugitive without delay. The scene shifts to a bleak howling blizzard tearing across the jagged mountain peaks. In the freezing snow, Imperial guards find the frozen, motionless body of the young fugitive. Horrified onlookers witness severed heads displayed on high poles, signaling a grim end to the rebellion. Driven to absolute despair, the heartbroken princess prepares to hang herself from a rope in her chambers. Slipping into the dark room, the maid softly announces it is time for the princess's medicine. Holding the tray tightly, the maid walks into the room with a solemn expression. In a sudden panic, the maid screams in horror as the medicine bowl shatters upon the floor. Staring at the ceiling, the black-haired emperor wonders how long the princess will continue to punish herself for her father's sins. Sitting beside the bed, the grieving emperor watches over his deeply unconscious daughter. Slowly, the weak princess flutters her golden eyes open as she returns to consciousness. The emperor stares down in silent, heavy worry as his daughter finally awakens. Gritting his teeth, the sovereign is consumed by a deep, silent sense of guilt. Holding his fragile daughter, the emperor ignores the maid's delivery as he prepares to feed her. With a gentle but desperate plea, the father begs his weak daughter to take at least one bite. The frail princess weakly accepts a small sip from the spoon held by her father. A close-up of the father's eye reflects the devastating sight of his dying daughter. Holding her tightly, the weeping emperor confesses his terrifying fear that she will pass away before him. Overflowing with immense grief, the guilt-ridden father laments that his own cruel decisions have slowly destroyed his daughter's life. Resting limply in his arms, the princess remains completely silent as her father holds her close. Bathed in a soft, fading light, the emperor cradles his fragile daughter in a warm, sorrowful embrace. Surrounded by pure white funeral chrysanthemums, a portrait reveals that the grief-stricken emperor has passed away. A grand, solemn funeral procession carries the deceased monarch's coffin through the imperial palace. Under dark, turbulent clouds, a massive white flag waves as a loud voice demands the assembly's attention. Courtiers dressed in crimson robes bow flat on the wooden floor before the new ruler's throne. A booming declaration proclaims that from this day forward, the new sovereign alone is the absolute law. Sitting on the throne, the maniacal new ruler declares the nation a sacred kingdom devoted strictly to the Baekdu cult. Clenching his fist, the mad emperor threatens to execute anyone who dares to slander or question his new religious order. A peaceful bird chirps on a lush green branch beneath the bright sunny blue sky. Opening the sliding doors, the maid cheerfully calls out to the princess to look outside. The maid happily remarks on how remarkably beautiful and bright the weather is today. Wearing a teal robe, the quiet princess sits alone in her room, lost in deep, solemn thought. Looking back at her mistress, the maid's face softens with a mixture of concern and pity. The maid gently steps forward, warmly suggesting that the princess step outside to enjoy the warm sunlight. Staring out blankly, the purple-haired princess remains silent, her heart still frozen in the past. The loyal maid softly adds that the white peonies in the palace garden are currently in gorgeous, full bloom. Shattered by loss and trapped in a golden cage, the devastated princess can only stare blankly into the empty void of her grief. The gentle maid presents a custom-made hairpin, trying to bring a sliver of comfort to her suffering mistress. Slowly rising to her feet, the weak princess prepares to finally face the world outside her dark chambers. Stepping out from the heavy shadows, she walks slowly toward the brilliant light of the palace doors. The heavy wooden doors slide open, bathing the weary princess in the blinding glare of the outdoor garden. Shielding her sensitive eyes from the intense glare, she struggles to adjust to the long-forgotten warmth of the sun. Staring at the blooming white peonies, her vision blurs as a cherished memory of her lost love flashes in her eyes. In a beautiful flashback, her beloved young lord holds her close under a bright blue sky, calling out to her tenderly. Smiling warmly, the young lord vows to remain devoted to her side until the absolute end of his days. Overjoyed by his sincere words, the young princess blushes deeply, her heart completely filled with hope and love. The blissful memory suddenly fractures, dissolving into a blinding flash of light as reality cruelly pulls her back. Tears of bitter sorrow stream down her pale cheeks as the painful truth of her isolation crashes over her once more. Letting the custom-made hairpin slip from her fingers, her long purple hair cascades freely around her shoulders in her despair. Clutching her aching chest, the weeping princess stands alone in the garden, utterly consumed by a suffocating sense of loss. Collapsing onto her knees among the flowers, she cries out in agony, demanding to know why he broke his promise and left her behind. Screaming through her tears, she laments that continuing to survive in a world without him is a fate worse than death. Watching her mistress disintegrate into raw grief, the heartbroken maid covers her mouth as tears stream down her own face. The scene shifts to reveal that clothes and silver have been prepared to help the survivors endure their harsh, remote exile. A heartfelt letter lies on a mahogany desk expressing deep concern for their well-being and promising more news soon. With trembling hands, the princess carefully wraps the packages herself while her loyal maid watches in anxious silence. The princess explains that these survival gifts are meant for the exiled family members, insisting on preparing them with her own hands. Bowing her head, the maid softly agrees to help facilitate the princess's secret aid mission. Gathering her resolve, the princess muses that perhaps the heavens kept her alive to protect those her beloved left behind. Suddenly, a dark, imposing silhouette appears behind the paper screen door, interrupting the quiet moment. Her eyes widening in shock, the princess questions why the mad emperor would suddenly summon her to his presence. The scene shifts to the opulent imperial chambers of the deranged new ruler Sukjong. Lounging shamelessly with his concubines, the mad emperor bluntly decrees that it is time for the princess to marry. Gasps of utter horror escape the princess as the terrifying reality of his command sinks in. Throwing herself flat onto the red carpet, she desperately begs to be allowed to live out her days as a temple nun instead. Pressing her face near the floor, she cries out, pleading with her heartless brother to show a single shred of mercy. Releasing his concubine, the furious emperor shouts that having his sister live a lowly life would bring unacceptable shame to his name. Enveloped in a cold aura of dread, she passionately pleads for him to withdraw his cruel marital decree. With a sinister glint in his eyes, the emperor pointedly asks if the surviving members of the rebel family are still breathing. Paralyzed by a sudden wave of sheer terror, the princess begins to tremble violently at his veiled threat. Stepping down from his platform, the tyrant coldly declares that traitors and their bloodlines do not deserve to live in peace. He paces around her, bitterly reminding her of how that disgraced family dared to scheme and almost proceed with a wedding. Crouching down to whisper directly in her ear, he maliciously notes that executing the exiled wife and daughter would be true justice. Terrified for their lives, she desperately begs him to spare the innocent mother and daughter from his wrath. Clenching her fist tightly against the floor, she realizes she has no choice but to submit to his cruel terms. Wearing a grotesque, triumphant smirk, the emperor announces that he has already hand-selected a perfect husband for her. A cold proclamation seals her fate, declaring the wedding will proceed immediately to avoid wasting any more time. Outside, a young member of the state-sponsored Baekdu cult cheerfully instructs her to make a hefty monetary offering on her way out. The tyrant's voice echoes, warning her that this monthly offering will be the ongoing price to keep those two lives safe. Bowing flat on the carpet in complete defeat, she whispers her absolute submission to her brother's horrific extortion. The scene shifts to the wedding courtyard, where observers whisper in disgust at how cruelly the princess is being treated. Empress Namsong watches in quiet disapproval, muttering that even common village girls are treated with more dignity than this. Wearing his grand imperial crown, the emperor turns sharply, commanding the empress to remain silent and not meddle in his affairs. Narrowing her eyes in deep disgust, the empress silently laments that the princess is being sacrificed to a vulgar wretch. The camera reveals the groom, a repulsive and slimy official who greedily licks his lips at his sudden fortune. Staring at his new bride, the vulgar man gloats in sick triumph, eager to claim the beautiful and broken princess as his personal prize. Empress Namsong watches in dark satisfaction as her long-orchestrated schemes finally begin to yield power. A cool, depressive shadow falls over the empire, signaling a dark turn of events. 5 years of brutal tyranny pass in a flash, changing the kingdom forever. Panic breaks out as desperate footsteps echo through the cold palace corridors. The loyal maid bursts through the sliding doors, frantic with urgent news. Seeking a quiet escape, the purple-haired princess sits in silence, clutching a calligraphy brush. Winter settles over the quiet chambers, reflecting the cold isolation in her heart. The princess quietly pens a secret letter, desperate to aid those suffering in exile. A quiet moment of transitions as the high-stakes political game intensifies behind closed doors. Under the cover of a windy night, dark secrets brew within the imperial palace. With delicate stroke, she writes a heartfelt plea to the exiled family of her lost love. Sparing no effort, the princess finishes her letter, hoping her winter gifts reach them safely. The maid slams the doors open again, her face pale with absolute terror. She frantically warns the princess that her vulgar husband has arrived to claim his marital rights. Desperate to protect her mistress, the maid urges her to quickly hide beneath the blankets. The princess recoils in absolute disgust, realizing her drunken husband is forcing his way in. With a violent crash, the heavy screen door is brutally slammed open from the outside. Stumbling into the room, the heavily intoxicated husband demands she stop avoiding him. Seeing the maid standing guard, the furious husband demands she get out immediately. Baring his teeth, the tyrant threatens to strip down unless the servant leaves them alone. Trembling with fear, the maid desperately pleads with her mistress to let her stay. Recognizing her inescapable fate, the princess solemnly orders her maid to obey the imperial command. Tears of bitter helplessness stream down the heartbroken maid's face as she must leave her mistress. Bowing in deep sorrow, the loyal servant turns to leave the princess to her fate. The heavy sliding door shut with a final devastating click, trapping the princess inside. Stripping off his top, the slimy husband gloats in sick satisfaction that she is finally submitting. The repulsive man crawls greedily across the floor toward the helpless princess. He reaches out a dirty, eager hand to tear open her white ceremonial robe. Closing her eyes in pure agony, the weeping princess laments that her heart remains forever bound to another. Suddenly, the doors burst open again as the frantic husband shouts at the intruders. Sweat dripping down her face, the panic maid screams that a full-blown rebellion has erupted. She urges them to flee immediately as armed traitors breach the inner palace walls. Overcome by sheer cowardice, the terrified husband immediately runs away, abandoning his wife. Hiding in fear, the cowardly official peeks through a crack in the door to save his own skin. Outside, massive columns of fire consume the majestic palace pagoda, turning the imperial seat to ash. Staring calmly at the roaring inferno, the princess watches her golden cage burn to the ground. A bloody, fiery transition engulfs the scene as the imperial order crumbles in chaos. Imperial servants and guards flee in absolute panic as the rebels call to overthrow the emperor. A voice desperately suggests a split plan to avoid a mass execution in the open courtyard. An official courageously volunteers to act as a decoy while urging Lady Yi to escape with the princess. Though Lady Yi hesitates to leave him behind, he insists it is their only chance of survival. Under a brilliant full moon, the survivors flee deep into the dark, whispering woods. Shadows lengthen under the night sky as their desperate escape takes a perilous turn. Standing in the clearing under the moonlight is none other than the legendary warrior himself. Cold steel glints in the night as a blood-stained sword is slowly drawn from its sheath. The princess gasps in disbelief as she comes face to face with her long-lost love, Lord Kong. A heavy silence falls over the dark forest as the star-crossed lovers finally reunite. Without a word, a cold, blood-dripping blade is raised directly to the princess's throat. Tears stream down her face as the princess prepares to meet her end at his hands. The warrior's conflicted eye betrays the deep, agonizing pain of a man torn between duty and love. The ultimate coup d'etat reaches its breaking point as a soldier is ordered to escort Princess Sukjung to the council hall under the cover of night. Tears of absolute despair mix with blood on the face of the heartbroken purple-haired princess as she faces her inescapable doom. Within the cold blue-lit palace chambers, the princess and her maid are forced to kneel as Lord Kyung stands before them. A chilling close-up gaze of Lord Kyung's eye reveals the sheer intensity of a man hardened by war and betrayal. Steeling her resolve despite the fresh wounds on her neck, the princess stares back at her former lover. A frantic shout echoes through the silent chamber as the general is suddenly summoned to handle an intruder. The corrupt, cowardly husband is dragged into the room in disgrace, desperately begging the general for mercy. The princess's eyes widen in horror as her pathetic husband pleads for his life in exchange for selling her out. Towering over them, the stoic general reveals the shocking extent of the husband's treachery. Strangled by fear and ropes, the tied-up husband grovels as his ultimate betrayal is laid bare before his wife. Cold steel rings through the air as Lord Kyung draws his blade, commanding the princess to watch her husband's demise. In a desperate split-second reaction, the princess dashes forward to save her pathetic husband. Throwing her body over the coward, she frantically begs the general to stop this execution. Lord Kyung's expression twists in profound agony and disgust at her defense of such a pathetic traitor. He bitterly demands to know why she still protects a man who willingly sold her life away. Looking up with tear-filled eyes, the princess pleads for mercy to prevent any more pointless bloodshed now that the empire has fallen. The heartbreaking realization crushes the general's spirit as he assumes she must have truly loved this vulgar coward. Looking down with deep sorrow, Kyung laments that she abandoned him and his entire family for the sake of her husband. With a swift and final declaration, Lord Kyung unleashes a blinding, colorful sword strike to deliver swift justice. A single choking gasp echoes through the room as blood splatters violently across the cold floorboards. The corrupt husband's lifeless body collapses with a heavy thud right beside the trembling princess. Paralyzed in absolute horror, the princess stares blankly at the grim aftermath of the general's wrath. Pulling her close, the heartbroken general bitterly asks if her 5 years with that pathetic man were truly worth her loyalty. He slowly releases his grip on her shoulder, his touch leaving behind a cold, lingering sense of betrayal. Without another word, the stoic general turns his back and walks away into the shadows. The loyal maid rushes forward to console her devastated mistress as they watch the tyrant leave them in ruins. Lord Kyung marches out of the chambers, vowing to dismantle everything the princess holds dear. Sparks and dark red embers fly into the air as the violent transition of power consumes the imperial court. Gripping his sheathed blade, Lord Kyung stands resolute, ready to personally execute his final vengeance. The scene shifts to the golden imperial throne room as a voice pays respects to the newly crowned emperor. The new sovereign sits proudly on the throne as Lord Kyung stands before him in the center of the Grand Council chamber. Extending his hand, the new emperor in yellow robes enthusiastically declares that the era of turmoil has finally ended. Standing stoically amid the celebration, Lord Kyung keeps his hand resting firmly on the hilt of his sword. His cold, unreadable expression suggests his personal war is far from over. Watching from the sidelines, the red-robed official quietly marvels at how the general managed to survive and cling to life. The official notes how Kyung orchestrating the coup has earned him the supreme favor of the new emperor. Gritting his teeth in frustration, the red-robed official realizes he must find a way to handle this powerful wildcard. He schemes to bind Kyung to his family by marrying him to Nayoung, ensuring the deadly warrior remains close. The yellow-robed emperor unfurls a grand scroll to address the remaining imperial matters. Rolling up the scroll, the emperor announces that the affairs of the deposed dynasty are officially concluded. Suddenly, the scheming official speaks up, warning that one crucial person still awaits royal judgment. The red-robed official waits patiently to spring his trap. When asked by the curious emperor, the official boldly singles out Princess Sukjong as the target. Kyung's eyes narrow in fury as his hand tightens with murderous intent around his sword hilt. The official craftily argues that while she married into another clan, her hidden crimes cannot be ignored. He raises his hand, exposing the princess's massive golden offerings to the forbidden Baekdu cult over the last 5 years. The official servant presents the damning records of her financial transactions directly to the imperial throne. Reading the scroll, the shocked emperor declares that supporting a heretical sect is a severe crime for any imperial member. He coldly decrees that Princess Sipjung must be immediately stripped of her status and made a government slave. With a sinister glint in his eye, the scheming official smiles, eager to see how Kyung reacts to this brutal sentence. The throne room erupts in tension as the newly crowned emperor demands his court's final judgment on the captive princess. Kneeling in submission, one official demands the ultimate execution of the heretical princess, while another urges a merciful exile. Looking deeply troubled, the emperor reminds his court that the princess never openly abused her high station. To the horror of her allies, the emperor reduces her sentence to a lifetime of grueling labor at Daebin Palace. Standing silently in the background, the scarred general tightly grips his weapon as his former love's doom is sealed. Watching from the shadows, the plotting official smiles in wicked satisfaction, knowing the star-crossed lovers are separated forever. The dark palace halls fall quiet as the political execution of the princess is officially set in stone. Left alone with the scarred general, the emperor praises his battlefield heroism and offers him any grand reward he desires. Bowing respectfully, the stoic warrior rejects riches and high ranking, preparing to ask for a singular favor. The sovereign gestures warmly, promising the general that any wish he harbors will be instantly granted. Closing his eyes, the general's mind slips into a dark spiral of painful, long-buried memories. Opening his eyes, his gaze burns with an icy, merciless fury as his thirst for vengeance consumes him. The narrative shifts into a dark flashback, stepping back to the origins of his burning hatred. He remembers walking those same cold corridors years ago when his world fell apart. The painful memory shifts back to 5 years ago when the initial betrayal shattered his family. He recalls the horrific night his home burned, still refusing to believe she was the informant who condemned his bloodline. The memory turns to the grand royal wedding where the entire court gathered to celebrate her new union. Disguised as a mere guard, the shattered warrior watched in absolute agony as his beloved married another. The boastful husband gloated to the court that the princess starved herself just for the privilege of marrying him. Hearing of her profound devotion to another man, the hidden warrior's hand trembled with a silent, heart-shattering rage. After his supposed death, she had happily moved on, cementing his descent into absolute despair. The memory shifts to her cowardly husband, instantly groveling for his life and offering up her hiding spot to save his own skin. Cruelly betrayed, the general realized she had destroyed his family for a pathetic, self-serving coward. Returning to the present, the general's soul burns with a cold fury as he questions why his sword hesitated. Gripping his sword hilt under a dark, heavy energy, he realizes a swift death is far too merciful for her sins. He vows to prolong her torment, watching her crumble slowly before his very eyes. He resolves to take her life only at her most desperate and wretched moment. Under the dark night, the loyal maid desperately begs for mercy, swearing the princess was coerced into making forbidden cult offerings. Tears of bitter anguish stream down the maid's face as she pleads to save her beloved mistress from her fate. Embracing her crying servant, the stoic princess gently tells her to remain silent and never speak of this truth again. Heartbroken, the maid desperately tries to protest, unable to accept this tragic injustice. Realizing this is their final farewell, the tearful princess bids a gentle goodbye and wishes her maid a peaceful life. The desperate cries of the maid echo helplessly into the vast, cold, starry night. Reaching out in vain, the devastated servant watches her mistress walk away into a lifetime of servitude. Resigning herself to her grim fate, the princess hopes her suffering will atone for her father's past sins. Looking back with tear-filled eyes, she realizes this exile means she will likely never see Lord Kyung again. Staring at the fading palace gate, she bitterly regrets not gazing into his eyes for just a moment longer. Gently touching the fresh scar on her neck, she is suddenly ordered to halt by a guard. A stern guard approaches the captive women, ready to enforce his cruel authority. Noticing her wooden rose hairpin, the guard demands she hand it over, stating palace slaves have no right to personal belongings. Clinging desperately to the wooden ornament, the princess begs to keep the only precious keepsake she has left. The cold-hearted guard glares at her, completely unmoved by her frantic pleading. Ignoring her tears, the ruthless guard coldly orders them to keep moving into the dark forest. A heavy silence looms over the dark forest as they journey deeper into the night. They finally arrive at the remote, blue-lit Daebin Palace where her new life of torment begins. Trembling with anxiety, the princess asks the guard exactly where they are going. Pointing his wooden club forward, the guard gestures toward a dark, isolated estate in the woods. Looking at the creepy estate, the princess's eyes widen in sheer horror as a shocking realization hits her. Paralyzed by fear, she stumbles backward as the terrifying truth of her destination is laid bare. Collapsing to the cold ground, the weeping princess is left to face her ultimate horrifying nightmare. A grand forbidden gate looms under the pitch-black sky, sealing the princess's fate in this wretched palace. Her mind drifts to the past, remembering how her beloved promised to fill her favorite garden with flowers once they were wed. In that beautiful memory, she had happily accepted his promise with a radiant, loving smile. Returning to her harsh reality, she weeps bitterly over the cruel irony of being exiled to the very place she once dreamed of sharing with him. Under the cold full moon, she despairs over whether this grueling exile is heaven's ultimate punishment. The morning sun rises, exposing the decaying, dust-covered wooden beams of her new prison. The suffocating dust of the long-abandoned estate immediately forces the black-haired maid Kopun into a violent coughing fit. A dirty rag slams heavily onto the filthy floorboards as they struggle to clear away years of neglect. Kopun complains bitterly about the endless scrub work required for a place left rotting for 5 long years. Dalray, the freckled maid, playfully teases her partner, noting that Kopun only cares about getting her next meal. Dalray firmly orders Kopun to stop complaining and mop her side of the courtyard if she wants any dinner tonight. Meanwhile, the delicate princess strains with all her remaining strength just to lift a heavy wooden bucket of water. Suddenly, her grip slips and she gasps in shock as the heavy bucket crashes down, spilling water everywhere. Dalray turns around in sheer surprise at the sudden loud commotion. Rushing down the stone steps, the helpful maid runs to assist the fallen princess, who sits on her knees in the wet dirt. Kneeling beside her, Dalray desperately asks if she is all right after her painful tumble. Watching from the doorway, Kopun mockingly scolds the princess for acting like a pampered, delicate noble. The strict head slave, Doksun, suddenly arrives and angrily reprimands the princess for making such a messy blunder. Glaring with intense fury, Doksun demands to know why a girl who looks so clever cannot perform a single basic chore. Dismissing her clumsiness, Doksun points away and orders the disgraced princess to go wipe the floors of the side wing instead. Clinging to her dirty cleaning cloth, the submissive princess quietly accepts her punishment as her hands begin to blister. Dalray gently wraps her arm around the princess's shoulder, leading her away under Doksun's watchful gaze. Kopun listlessly grumbles that the useless princess cannot wash, cook, or do anything right without causing a disaster. As they walk into the dusty corridor, Kopun sighs in frustration, wondering how such a helpless noble will ever survive. Inside the quiet room, the princess gets down on her knees and diligently begins scrubbing the dusty floorboards. Pausing for a brief moment, she wipes the heavy sweat from her brow as the grueling physical labor takes its toll. She looks down in utter dismay at her raw, bleeding, and blistered hands. Stealing her resolve, she squeezes her rag in the water, vowing to quickly adapt and pull her own weight. Suddenly, a gentle hand taps the princess on her shoulder from behind, breaking her focus. She turns in surprise to find Dalray standing there with a warm, friendly smile, holding a basket of hot potatoes. Sitting down together, Dalray happily reveals she snuck the food from the kitchen and urges them to eat before they get caught. Grateful and starving, the princess eagerly reaches out to take one of the steaming potatoes. She instantly recoils in pain as the hot potato burns her delicate, uncalloused fingers. Dalray chuckles softly and offers to peel the potato for her, proudly showing off her own tough, hard-working hands. A soft, tearful smile of genuine gratitude finally returns to the princess's weary face. For a brief, fleeting moment, the misery of their exile fades as they share a peaceful, warm meal together. Suddenly, the sliding door is violently slammed open, shattering their quiet sanctuary. The terrified princess stands up at attention as the imposing head slave Doksun looms in the doorway. Doksun coldly interrupts their break, demanding the bewildered princess run an urgent errand for her immediately. The scene shifts to the bustling city marketplace, crowded with lively merchants and townspeople. Princess Sukjung quietly navigates the crowded streets as merchants loudly call out to advertise their exotic goods. To protect her identity, she covers her head with a white cloth and smudges dirt on her face, remembering her task to buy medicine. Back at the estate, Dalray argues fiercely with Kopun, warning that letting someone so beautiful walk around unguarded invites disaster. Kopun dismisses her concerns, coldly pointing out that nobody rescues slaves when they get hurt or go missing. Kopun demands to know why Dalray is wasting so much energy fussing over a simple housemaid anyway. Dalray argues that they are all equals in this house, but Kopun scoffs and accuses her of being hopelessly naive. Turning on her heel, Kopun warns her to stop dreaming of gratitude, as former nobles never repay the kindness of slaves. Looking out the window, Kopun quietly sighs, wondering when the princess will finally wake up to the harsh reality of her situation. Dalray smiles smugly, teasing her grumpy partner for secretly worrying about the princess despite her tough words. Lost and alone under the blazing sun, the exiled princess desperately tries to decipher the map to complete her perilous errand. Finding her target, the exiled princess finally locates the apothecary shop. Her heart sinks as she spots a massive, daunting queue of patients outside. She is relieved that local commoners have access to medical care here. The apothecary surprises her by asking if she's from the general's estate. She bypasses his suspicion, diagnosing a case as potential typhoid fever. The apothecary narrows his eyes, impressed by a mere servant's medical knowledge. He pieces things together, guessing she is a noble fallen from grace. She quickly deflects, claiming she only observed the diagnosis once over someone's shoulder. Internally, she bitterly remembers studying medicine to care for her beloved Lord Kyung during his military campaigns. Back then, she eagerly pored over medical texts, never dreaming those skills would be wasted. Clutching the cheap herbs, she accepts that these basic remedies must suffice. She hurries down the dirt path, desperate to deliver the life-saving medicine. She silently thanks the kind apothecary for accommodating her meager funds. Suddenly, a speeding carriage splashes a wave of filthy mud all over her. The carriage passengers gasp in shock at the sudden commotion outside. The driver violently yanks the reins to bring the speeding horses to a halt. Inside, the furious blonde noblewoman loudly scolds her driver for his reckless path. Peering out the window, the noblewoman's eyes suddenly lock onto the mud-covered slave. Princess Sokjung stands dazed, her dirty clothes and face stained with wet mud. Recognition strikes like lightning as the noblewoman realizes the slave's true identity. She recalls her father mentioning Sukchung's exile, wondering if her eyes play tricks. Denying her doubts, she becomes absolutely certain that the mud-stained slave is indeed the fallen princess. The noblewoman's mouth curls into a sinister snarl as she prepares to issue an order. With malicious intent, she orders her subordinate to tail the slave and confirm her identity. A dark, toxic energy blooms like poisonous flowers in the wake of her commands. Unaware of the danger, Princess Sukjung quietly slips back through the estate gate. Back in the carriage, a cruel, plotting smile creeps across the noblewoman's face. Under a canopy of dark blue roses, she warns her spy to remain completely undetected. Meanwhile, night falls over the silent, grand estate of the general. Inside a dimly lit study, stacks of books and scrolls sit abandoned on a desk. Exhausted and emotionally drained, Lord Kyung sleeps fitfully on his desk. In a tragic flashback, a bloodied, bruised prisoner begs his uncle to deliver a letter to the princess. The older man solemnly accepts the letter, promising to deliver it directly into her hands. The battered prisoner is brutally dragged back to his cold, wet cell by a guard. Collapsed on the straw, the dying man calls out her name in absolute anguish. In a final, heartbreaking thought, he urges her to forget him for her own safety. He curls into a ball, left to rot in the cold, desolate darkness of the dungeon. Lord Kyung's eyes snap open in sheer panic as his aide's voice shatters his nightmare. Still trembling from his dream, the general, weary, orders his aide to send the visitor in. The concerned subordinate bows and leaves to summon the unexpected guest. The high steward enters the blue-lit study, asking if the general has been well. Greeting him warmly, the general remarks that the steward looks completely unchanged. Laughing off the compliment, the steward states that peace has left him with little to worry about before asking the purpose of his visit. The steward's face turns serious as he conveys the emperor's deep concern. Lord Kyung's eyes widen, anxiously wondering if he has somehow angered the emperor. The steward reassures him, explaining that the monarch merely worries about his refusal to return home. Kyung, downcast, admits that his house no longer feels like a home. The steward firmly delivers the emperor's royal command for him to return home and rest immediately. Obeying the royal decree, the general suffers in silence, still lacking the courage to face her. He questions his own dark motives, wondering why he keeps his beloved trapped as a slave. Just as the general spirals into despair, the high steward arrives with a royal decree from the emperor himself, demanding he accept countless gifts to restore his strength. Exhausted and burdened, Lord Kyung rejects the emperor's gifts, coldly ordering his guest to leave for the day. Returning to his grand estate under the cover of night, Lord Kyung prepares to face the dark reality of his home. He steps down from his horse, his heavy boots making a sharp sound against the cold stone floor. Under the starry night sky, the troubled general steals his resolve before walking into his silent courtyard. He enters to find a flurry of activity as servants busy themselves hauling heavy chests of imperial treasures. The massive wooden crates overflow with luxurious jewels and precious beaded ornaments sent directly from the palace. The loyal steward quickly bows in deep respect, warmly welcoming his weary master back to the estate. The steward presents a ledger, explaining that he distributed the imperial gifts among the servants and secured the rest. As he hands over the documents, the steward notes that the inventory of Princess Sukjung's confiscated goods is listed at the very bottom. Lord Kyung's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as he reviews the surprisingly brief list of her remaining belongings. The steward suddenly holds out a plain parchment, revealing they uncovered a hidden letter while sorting her things. A heavy silence falls as Kyung takes the letter, his heart sinking as he stares at the mysterious parchment. A wave of sudden, violent fury washes over him as he grits his teeth in absolute betrayal. Sensing the terrifying shift in the atmosphere, the startled steward hesitantly calls out to his trembling master. Without uttering a single word, the general storms off in a blind rage, leaving his confused servant shouting after him. Inside the quiet corridors, the exiled princess diligently scrubs the floorboards when a sudden heavy footstep shatters the silence. The sliding doors fly open as Lord Kyung stands towering in the entrance, prompting a nearby maid to bow in panic. An oppressive dark aura of pure malice erupts from the silent general as he glares down at the kneeling princess. Suddenly, Lord Kyung violently grabs her wrist, forcing her to gasp in shock at his rough touch. He drags the terrified princess out into the cold night as she desperately begs him to wait. The other maid watches in stunned silence, completely paralyzed with fear by her master's terrifying rage. Under the chilling glow of the full moon, the massive estate stands quiet as a dark storm brews within its walls. Kyung ruthlessly shoves the princess onto the hard ground, leaving her gasping for breath in the dirt. Looming over her, the furious general brandishes the confiscated paper and demands to know if she wrote the letter. Her eyes widen in absolute horror as she recognizes the letter meant for her beloved family members in exile. The general coldly confirms that her personal correspondence was mixed in with her confiscated belongings. With veins popping on his face, the general demands to know if she is intentionally mocking him. As she desperately stammers her innocence, Kyung explodes, accusing her of having the nerve to stand before him after ruining everything. In a fit of unchecked wrath, he accuses her of orchestrating the deaths of his family and tormenting his loved ones. She pleads that there's a massive misunderstanding, but the enraged general ruthlessly tears the letter in two right before her eyes. The princess watches in paralyzed shock as her precious letter is shredded into useless scraps. Tossing the pieces aside, the general delivers a spine-chilling warning that her life will be forfeit if she ever crosses him again. Left shivering on the cold ground, the weeping princess desperately whispers that it was only a simple letter to check on her family's safety. She reaches for the scattered scraps, weeping as she wonders why such a harmless letter could trigger such intense hatred. A sudden, chilling realization flashes in her eyes as she pieces together a terrifying truth about her family's fate. She remembers the Deputy General, Wang Jung-moon, who once escorted her to the council hall under General Kyung's orders. Desperate for answers, she frantically runs through the dark courtyard, knowing she must hear the truth directly from him. The bare, twisted branches of the old tree loom like skeletal fingers against the vast, oppressive night sky. She collapses on her knees beneath the massive tree, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. With tears streaming down her face, she begs the Deputy General to tell her why her mother and sister have never returned. The Deputy General looks down with a sorrowful expression, asking if she truly does not know the truth. He drops a devastating truth bomb, flatly stating that both of her beloved family members passed away long ago. Her world shatters instantly as she claws her fingers deep into the dirt, groaning in agonizing disbelief. He delivers the grim details, revealing her mother died on the grueling journey to her place of exile. He adds that her sister took her own life after suffering a horrific assault at the hands of a corrupt official. The princess collapses completely, her heart broken beyond repair as she weeps on the cold ground. The Deputy General turns away in solemn silence, unable to bear the sight of her overwhelming grief. Left utterly alone, the devastated princess unleashes a raw, blood-curdling scream of pure anguish into the night. Her agonizing screams echo into the cold sky, leaving her trapped in a hopeless darkness with no escape. In the dead of night, painful groans echo from the dark corners of a grand estate, signaling a soul trapped in a relentless nightmare. Lord Kyung tosses and turns in his sleep, breaking into a cold sweat as dark memories from his past claw their way back to the surface. The nightmare plunges him back into a horrific dungeon where he was brutally tortured with white-hot iron brands. His imprisoned, blood-stained father desperately urges him to seek refuge with Prince Nyang to secure his safety. The young man violently protests, refusing to abandon his father and choosing to endure captivity alongside him. His father sorrowfully points out that his shattered legs make escape an absolute impossibility for him. Desperate to save his father, the son pleads to draw the guard's attention so his father can escape. Insisting on bearing the family's ruin alone, the father commands his son to flee and never look back. In a heartbreaking sacrifice, the father orders his son to survive at all costs before raising a blade to his own throat. Horrified realization strikes the young man as he watches his father prepare to commit the ultimate sacrifice. A fatal, sickening slash echoes through the pitch-black cell, sealing his father's tragic fate in a pool of blood. Loyal allies forcefully drag the grieving youth away, warning him that they must not let his father's sacrifice be in vain. Reaching out in vain, the devastated youth screams for his father as he is dragged further into the dark. Lord Kyung bolts upright in his bed, gasping for breath as the phantom screams of his past finally release him. Clutching his chest in agony, he struggles to ground himself as the psychological scars flare up once more. Stripping off his clothes, he writhes in agony as the phantom heat of old torture wounds makes his body feel like it is burning alive. Overwhelmed by the intense physical phantom pain, he stumbles blindly, thrashing around the room and knocking over his furniture. Seeking immediate relief from the internal fire, he rushes out to the courtyard well and drops a bucket into the freezing water. Drenching himself in the icy water, he gasps heavily as the physical shock slowly begins to dull the phantom burning. Shivering in the cold night air, he slowly collects his thoughts and catches his breath. As morning approaches, a group of maidservants walks through the courtyard, gossiping about their master's sudden return the previous night. Princess Sukjang walks silently among them, her eyes heavy with sorrow as the gossip of the estate swirls around her. The maids suddenly halt in their tracks, gasping in shock as they stumble upon an unexpected sight in the courtyard. Standing bare-chested by the stone well, Lord Kyung looms in silence, his heavily scarred torso gleaming under the morning light. The crushing reminder of her deceased family members weighs heavily on the exiled princess's heart, leaving her devastated. The maids quickly bow in deep respect, nervously greeting their master upon finding him awake so early. Unable to face him, the exiled princess hurriedly runs away, leaving the general to bitterly conclude that she cannot even bear to look at him. He grips the stone edge of the well, trying to convince himself that her deep resentment is ultimately for the best. Staring into the distance, he resolves to use her hatred to finally sever the lingering feelings of attachment he holds for her. The scene shifts to a meeting with an older lord who warmly praises Kyung, stating his father would be proud of him. The older man looks on with fatherly affection, noting how remarkably strong and capable Kyung has grown over the years. The guest quickly apologizes, correcting himself to address him formally as a general rather than by his childhood name. Kyung gently pours the tea, calmly reassuring the older lord that he does not mind the informal address. Respectfully serving his guest, Kyung expresses that he views his late father's longtime friend as a father figure. A look of genuine pleasure washes over the older lord's face as he expresses his deep joy at Kyung's words. Taking a slow sip of his tea, the visitor casually shifts the conversation to a more personal matter. He confronts Kyung with rumors that the general has been avoiding his own estate by sleeping at his office instead. He questions if Kyung avoids his home due to loneliness, adding that a man's life is only truly complete with a family of his own. He reminds the general of his age and mentions a specific noblewoman who has harbored deep feelings for him since childhood. Revealing his true intentions, the father proudly praises his daughter, Nayoung, and suggests it is finally time for Kyung to marry her. Kyung humbly deflects the proposal, stating that Nayoung is far too virtuous and noble a woman for someone like him. Looking away solemnly, he firmly declares his belief that he could never become a worthy husband to her. The older lord heartily laughs off Kyung's self-deprecation, insisting that no man in the capital is more accomplished than the general. His tone turns serious as he points out the unstable, highly divided state of the imperial court. Tension fills the air as Kyung remains silent, fully aware of the political machinations at play. Smiling with calculated intent, the lord emphasizes that the emperor himself would highly favor an alliance between their powerful families. Kyung internally acknowledges that a strategic marriage alliance is the ultimate key to stabilizing the fractured imperial factions. Despite the immense political pressure, the general firmly rejects the proposal, stating his heart is not ready to accept anyone. The understanding father gently smiles and clarifies that he is not demanding an immediate decision from the general. He urges Kyung to take a few days to carefully reconsider before delivering his final answer, leaving the heavy decision hanging in the air. Trapped in a web of political manipulation, the blue-haired general reluctantly consents to a high-stakes marriage proposal that will change everything. Meanwhile, a luxurious carriage rolls into the grand estate courtyard under the bright morning sun, bringing a storm of unexpected drama with it. Inside her carriage, a scheming woman presses her finger into scarlet ink, reflecting on the elusive and guarded nature of the general's heart. Checking her reflection in a hand mirror, the blonde noblewoman confidently reassures herself of the general's affection despite the presence of his former love. Her violet eyes gleam with dangerous ambition as she questions who else could possibly deserve to rule as the true mistress of this grand house. Stepping down from her carriage, the blonde lady is greeted with deep bows from the estate's anxious servants. With a firm step, she strides forward, determined to make her rival understand exactly who holds the power. She arrives at the gate, demanding to know if the general is in his quarters today. Ignoring the flustered guard's explanation that the general has not yet returned, she boldly pushes her way past him. The panicked servant reaches out in vain, desperately pleading with her not to barge in uninvited. He clutches his head in sheer distress, terrified of the impending clash about to unfold inside. Elsewhere in the estate, a pair of delicate hands diligently embroiders green bamboo shoots onto fine silk fabric. A senior maidservant confronts the purple-haired princess, questioning her true relationship with their powerful master. The exiled princess looks up in silence, her amber eyes reflecting a profound, unspeakable sorrow. The maidservant demands to know why the princess requested to work in a hidden corner where the master would never have to see her. Sitting beside her, the head maid sighs deeply, admitting how difficult it is to manage such a complex situation. Standing up, she instructs the princess to confine herself to the end room and focus entirely on her summer embroidery duties. As she walks away, the maid internally justifies her decision, believing it is best to keep the two separated for their own safety. Left alone to her needlework, the princess suddenly pauses as the sound of footsteps approaches her secluded room. She rises to investigate, wondering if a lost guest has wandered to this remote corner of the estate. Opening the sliding door, she is startled to find the blonde noblewoman standing directly before her. The blonde lady's eyes widen in absolute fury as she instantly recognizes the princess hiding in the shadows. Without warning, she delivers a brutal slap that echoes sharply through the quiet room. Trembling with rage, the noblewoman shrieks, demanding how she dares to glare at her with those defiant eyes. The princess stands frozen in shock, clutching her burning bruised cheek in absolute disbelief. She quickly realizes from the visitor's luxurious silk garments that she's dealing with a highborn lady of immense power. Panic sets in as she fears she has rashly offended someone of vital importance to the general. Swallowing her pride, the princess bows deeply and begs for forgiveness for her perceived rudeness. The blonde lady grits her teeth, her face twisting with bitter resentment as she looks down upon her rival. The princess continues to apologize, explaining that she did not realize the visitor was of such a prestigious rank. Disregarding the apology, the arrogant noblewoman struts into the small room, inspecting her surroundings with disgust. She sneers at the princess, accusing her of stealing everything she ever desired back in the capital. Looking around, she insultingly remarks that the room is a pigsty, proving the household holds absolutely no value for her. She steps in close, menacingly declaring that she knows exactly who the princess is and what she has done. Towering over her, she blames the princess's father for casting the entire Kyung clan into a dark abyss. She leans in close, whispering a venomous insult that anyone without a conscience is worse than a mere beast. The princess's eye trembles in terror as the noblewoman promises to marry the general and sell her off to a remote frontier. Despite the chilling threat, the princess maintains her composure and politely asks why a noble lady would worry about a lowly slave. The blonde lady is visibly shaken and infuriated by the princess's calm and dignified response. She bursts into a cruel, mocking laugh, questioning if a slave could ever hope to catch her brother's eye. The princess simply bows in silence, refusing to engage with the noblewoman's bitter mockery. Having delivered her cruel warnings, the blonde noblewoman turns and haughtily exits the small room. Left alone in the quiet room, the princess looks down, processing the devastating news of the general's impending marriage. Striding through the courtyard, the noblewoman passes the bowing maidservants with her head held high. She grits her teeth in sheer irritation, muttering about how thoroughly unpleasant the encounter was. She walks out of the estate gate, leaving a trail of tense silence behind her. The bewildered maidservant looks back, wondering who that dazzling yet arrogant visitor could have been. As night falls, a bright full moon rises in the starry sky, bringing a quiet chill to the estate. The dark-haired general finally returns home, greeted by an anxious servant who warns him that a guest has been waiting since midday. With a sense of quiet dread, the general reaches out to open the door, completely unaware of the storm brewing within his walls. A dangerous romantic rival infiltrates the estate, flashing a deceptive smile as she awaits her target. Kyung confronts the unexpected guest, demanding to know the true purpose of her sudden visit. Smiling innocently, Naeung claims she was merely passing by and missed the lively old days. The stressed general warns her that an unmarried lady shouldn't visit a bachelor's home. Naeung smugly points out their intimate history, leaving the general completely speechless. Blushing deeply, the blonde noblewoman reveals her father told her about their impending marriage. Silence hangs heavy in the air as Kyung stares in cold disbelief. Deflecting her advances, Kyung dismisses her coldly and offers to show her out. Naeung desperately pursues the retreating general, begging him to listen to her. Suddenly, Naeung freezes mid-step as she spots an unexpected figure in the shadows. The exiled princess stands frozen with laundry, shocked to witness the tense encounter. Rage instantly consumes Naeung as she glares venomously at her royal rival. Desperate to assure dominance, the blonde noblewoman suddenly wraps her arms around Kyung. Startled by the sudden embrace, Kyung demands to know what she is doing. The purple-haired princess watches the intimate display, her heart breaking in silence. Before she can witness any more pain, a mysterious hand gently covers her eyes. The brown-haired man pulls the princess close, shielding her from the devastating sight. Holding the weeping princess, the brown-haired man looks on with deep protective resolve. The scene shifts back 5 years to the majestic sunlit Gigung province. An older lord commands a young guard to loyally serve his future master. The loyal brown-haired guard solemnly vows to devote his entire heart to his duty. The lord reveals the young master is destined to marry Princess Sukchong. Hearing this revelation, the young guard blushes in absolute shock and awe. The older lord recalls the guard's past glimpse of the beautiful royal princess. A grand royal procession marches through the palace gates under a brilliant sun. Standing guard, the young brown-haired man watches the arrival with bated breath. A luxurious palanquin comes to a halt in the middle of the courtyard. A little purple-haired princess steps down from the carriage, accompanied by her maid. Her vibrant pink gown sweeps gracefully across the stone courtyard floor. The young guard is instantly mesmerized, completely captivated by her royal presence. Looking upon her dazzling beauty, the guard's heart is captured forever. Suddenly, the delicate ornamental tassel slips from the young princess's waist. The little princess gasps in surprise as she realizes her precious accessory fell. The ornate floral ornament clatters to the ground near the guard's boots. Stepping forward, the attentive young guard retrieves the fallen treasure for her. The little princess pauses, looking down as the guard approaches her. Smiling like a bright summer day, the young princess warmly thanks her savior. The young guard stands dazed, completely spellbound by her radiant smile. Back in the present, the brown-haired man laments how unreachable she once seemed. Holding her close, he struggles to understand why she still deeply moves his heart. Taking her hand, the protective guard gently guides the sorrowful princess away. They walk together into the quiet night, leaving the toxic drama behind. Meanwhile, Kyung firmly removes Nayoung's hands, asserting he never agreed to the marriage. Nayoung looks up with tear-filled eyes, demanding to know why he avoids her. Weeping bitterly, she begs him to explain why he remains so heartlessly cruel. Her tears turn to venom as she demands if his rejection is because of the slave. Crimson with jealousy, she shouts that her love existed long before anyone else's. Turning away in a huff, the blonde noblewoman huffs that she is leaving. Before departing, she venomously warns that the princess will never have him. Alone in the dark, Kyung stands haunted by the devastating history of his family. A forbidden bond begins to bloom in the shadows as the brown-haired guard hesitatingly calls out to the silent princess. She softly expresses her deep gratitude to him for his timely intervention earlier. He humbly dismisses her gratitude while she politely excuses herself to finish her summer chores. Unwilling to let her leave just yet, the guard urgently begs her to wait. He steps forward, gently reaching out to offer her a humble secret token. The brown-haired guard catches her completely off guard by presenting her with a healing medicine. He places the small ceramic jar of ointment gently into her trembling hands. Intimidated by his generosity, the princess politely declines and tries to return the gift. He firmly insists she keep it, assuring her it is nothing of grand value. Elsewhere, the black-haired master walks through his moonlit estate, completely unaware of the encounter. Lord Kyung suddenly halts as he spots his deputy general interacting with the exiled princess. Kyung stares in cold disbelief, wondering when such an intimate connection formed between them. The general's face hardens as he internally notes the vast social gap between them. Feeling a sudden wave of irritation, Lord Kyung quietly turns away and retreats. Meanwhile, a persistent guard declares he will not leave until she accepts the medicine. The princess gazes down at her hands, deeply touched by his genuine concern. Smiling warmly, the guard bids her farewell and promises to bring more if needed. Left alone, she clutches the small jar close, a faint warmth in her eyes. The next day, her delicate hands meticulously embroider a vibrant pine tree onto silk. The princess pauses her needlework as a familiar voice calls out to her from outside. Her fellow maidservant, Kopun, enters with a large sack asking if she is busy. Kopun joyfully invites her to share a warm snack she brought along. Unwrapping the warm bundle, Kopun reveals the leftover sweet sake leaves from the brewery. Kopun explains how she grilled the treats with syrup, prompting surprise from the princess. Kopun happily bites into a piece, calling it a rare and delicious treat. Kopun teasingly warns her not to get drunk off the sweet alcohol-infused snack. Confidently claiming she can handle alcohol, the princess eagerly takes her first bite. Her amber eyes instantly widen in absolute delight at the incredibly sweet flavor. She highly praises the snack, much to the absolute satisfaction of her smug friend. The two close friends eagerly reach out to show more of the delicious treats. Stuffed and highly satisfied, Kopun rubs her belly, declaring she cannot eat another bite. Kopun collapses onto the mattress, completely exhausted from their satisfying feast. The princess suddenly hiccups, her face becoming deeply flushed from the hidden alcohol. Deeply intoxicated, she playfully hugs her panicked friend, who realizes she is completely drunk. Terrified, Kopun scrambles to sober the princess up before the strict master catches them. Kopun drags the stumbling, red-faced princess out into the courtyard for some fresh air. The struggling maid desperately pleads with the limp princess to stand on her own feet. Their chaotic attempt to sneak around is instantly halted as they run straight into Lord Yahello. The panicked maid freezes in sheer terror while the cold-eyed general stares at them in disbelief. Completely oblivious, the drunk princess points at the master and happily calls out his name. Kopun's face contorts in absolute horror as she anticipates the general's swift wrath. A heavy, terrifying silence descends on the courtyard as Kyung glares down in absolute fury. The master's gaze darkens, thoroughly displeased by the scandalous behavior of his household staff. Kopun internally despairs, fully expecting the powerful general to execute her for this massive blunder. Panicking, Kopun takes all the blame, desperately pleading for mercy for getting drunk on sake lees. Thoroughly annoyed by her loud rambling, the cold general demands that she shut her mouth. As Lord Kyung turns to leave, the bold, intoxicated princess suddenly grabs his silk sleeve. Kyung freezes in absolute shock as the blushing princess gazes directly into his eyes. Kopun drops to her knees, frantically apologizing for the princess's incredibly reckless, disrespectful touch. Kyung struggles to shake her off as Kopun frantically tries to pull the stubborn princess away. An explosive confrontation reaches its breaking point as Lord Kyung demands to know what the intoxicated princess is trying to say. The purple-haired princess gazes up at him with a deeply flushed, dizzy face. Losing her balance, her feet slip on the courtyard stones as she stumbles forward. In a heart-stopping moment, the princess collapses directly into Kyung's arms. Deeply disoriented, she struggles to process her surroundings before completely blacking out. The panic maid looks on in horror as the cold-eyed general is left holding the limp princess. A warm lantern glows softly in the dark as night descends on the silent estate. Inside the quiet room, Kyung sits watchfully beside the sleeping princess. Staring at her peaceful face, the master's cold facade begins to crack. Driven by a sudden tenderness, Kyung gently reaches out to touch her flushed cheek. His fingers linger softly near her lips as he struggles with his warring emotions. An abrupt, dark flash of traumatic family memory suddenly invades his mind. Kyung violently snaps awake, gasping for breath in a cold sweat. He is tormented by the realization that despite his deep hatred, he cannot bring himself to harm her. Grimacing in pain, the conflicted master grits his teeth against his growing affection. His dark thoughts manifest as a terrifying vision of choking the sleeping princess. In his nightmare, his hand grips her throat as she struggles to breathe. He snaps back to reality, realizing the horrifying depths of his inner demons. Terrified of his own dark impulses, Kyung flees the room in a panic. Completely oblivious to his torment, the princess continues her peaceful sleep in the quiet room. The next morning, a brilliant, warm sunlight bathes the peaceful estate courtyard. Waking up, the princess is shocked to hear about her chaotic behavior the previous night. Kopoon animatedly explains how the master saved her from severe punishment. A flashback reveals Kyung carrying her back to her quarters himself while ordering the staff to stay silent. The princess blushes deeply, feeling incredibly embarrassed yet quietly touched by his protection.
Suddenly, the sound of approaching footsteps interrupts their private conversation.
Another maid barging into the room demands to know why they are slacking off instead of working. Crossing her arms, the stern maid refuses to accept any of their excuses. Satisfied with her harsh scolding, the visiting maid storms off back to her duties. Stepping outside, the princess spots an elegant woman standing in the sunny courtyard. Recognizing the visitor from behind, the princess calls out her name in complete disbelief. The elegant woman turns around with tears welling in her eyes, revealing her identity as Okjem.
Overwhelmed with emotion, Okjem rushes forward and throws her arms around her beloved princess.
Tears stream down the princess's face as she embraces her loyal former page. Okjem presents a beautiful box of delicate flower cakes as a heartfelt offering. Wiping away her tears, the loyal woman smiles warmly at her long-lost mistress. She admits that she had absolutely no idea the princess was hidden away in this estate. The princess is stunned to realize Kyung was the one who secretly arranged her safety. She warns Okjem that associating with a discarded commoner like her could bring danger. Grasping her hands tightly, Okjem fiercely promises to bear any hardship in her place. Curious, the princess asks how Okjem managed to locate her secret refuge. Okjem hesitates, looking away nervously as she tries to find the words. The princess's amber eyes widen in shock as a sudden realization strikes her. Smiling brightly, the princess is relieved to learn that Okyem's husband is indeed her close ally. Okyem gestures to her maid to bring forward another surprise, signaling that their meeting is far from over. The princess politely tries to decline, worried about staying away from her chores for too long. Okyem desperately grabs her sleeve, begging her to wait just a little longer. Okyem points to the packages, insisting that she has brought something special for her. The packages are open to reveal a simple but beautiful set of new clothes. Smiling gently, the princess politely declines the generous gifts. Overwhelmed with profound emotion, the former princess tightly clutches her loyal page's hands. Smiling softly, the princess graciously accepts the simple offering of warm winter socks. Meanwhile, the scene transitions to a magnificent imperial room adorned with traditional paintings. Inside the palace, the solemn emperor questions the master's true knowledge of the situation. The emperor warns Lord Kyung that keeping Sukjeong close will only fuel his deep-seated resentment. Seeking finality, the sovereign asks Lord Kyung if he still believes the princess betrayed him. With a bitter smirk, the conflicted master firmly asserts his belief in her ultimate betrayal. Kyung coldly argues that her swift remarriage after his supposed death is undeniable proof of her betrayal. The emperor urges Kyung to recall the genuine warmth once visible in the princess's eyes. A fleeting memory of the happy, innocent princess resurfaces, raising doubts about her guilt. Shifting the focus, the emperor mentions the master's upcoming family memorial rites. The emperor gently prompts Kyung to visit the temple and finally clear his heart of doubt. He promises to allow Kyung to re-examine the entire betrayal case upon his return. Filled with renewed hope, the master bows deeply to express his profound gratitude to the emperor. The following morning, a massive caravan makes its way through the lush mountain path toward the temple. Leading the procession on horseback, Lord Kyung rides forward with a stern, watchful expression. Suddenly, the master's sharp eyes narrow as he catches sight of something unexpected on the path. Down below, the exhausted princess struggles to carry a massive cargo basket up the steep trail. Stumbling on a loose stone, her foot slips, threatening to throw her completely off balance. Seeing her trip, the master reflexively pulls back the reins of his horse in sheer panic. Sensing the sudden halt, the alert brown-haired guard quickly asks his master what happened. Nearby, a concerned maidservant rushes over to hold and stabilize the struggling princess. Regaining his composure, the master dismisses the event and orders the guard to move on. Riding away, the master stubbornly tries to dismiss her from his thoughts as just a clumsy slave. The bewildered guard watches his master ride ahead, utterly confused by his sudden reaction. As the midday sun beats down relentlessly, the scene shifts to a different path on the mountain. An elegant blonde-haired noblewoman ascends the steep stone steps accompanied by her personal servants. Sweating profusely, she angrily grumbles about her brother punishing her with this grueling track. She recalls her brother's advice that showing devotion at the temple will win Lord Kyung's heart. Gasping for breath, she loudly curses her brother for lying about the steepness of the path. Her maid gently fans her, encouraging her that her devotion will surely impress Lord Kyung. Wiping away her sweat, the arrogant noblewoman coldly declares that he had better appreciate her efforts. Meanwhile, the hard-working princess wipes her own brow as she diligently prepares the temple grounds. A sharp clap echoes through the courtyard, summoning all the temple workers to attention. The strict head maid demands flawless execution, stressing the vital importance of the master's rights. Lowering her eyes, the princess dutifully obeys the head maid's strict command. Inside the sacred temple hall, the temple staff meticulously arrange fresh offerings on the altar. Resting outside, the exhausted blonde-haired noblewoman fans herself while catching her breath. Suddenly, her eyes narrow into a sharp, venomous glare as she spots a familiar face. The princess ascends the temple steps, carefully balancing a wooden box of fresh red apples. Spotting her target, the malicious blonde-haired noblewoman stealthily sticks out her foot to trip her. With brutal precision, her foot collides with the unsuspecting princess's ankle. Losing her footing, the shocked princess falls forward as the apples spill out in every direction. The bright red offerings bounce violently down the steep stone steps, completely ruined. A panicked maid catches the stumbling princess, scolding her for dropping such precious offerings. Desperate to clean up the mess, the princess scrambles to collect the scattered fruit. Holding the half-empty basket, she pauses and slowly looks up toward the top of the stairs. Standing triumphantly above her, the noblewoman looms like an imposing shadow against the temple gates. The princess gazes at the wealthy noblewoman, realizing this was no mere accident. The sadistic noblewoman stares back down at her with a chilling, malicious grin of absolute satisfaction. Forced to swallow her pride, the dark-haired princess submissively agrees to clean the soiled fruit under the head maid's harsh, condescending demands. As evening descends on the mountains, the sacred temple glows with a serene yet heavy atmosphere. Inside the main hall, a monk strikes the wooden temple instrument, chanting prayers to soothe restless spirits. Lord Kyung and the blonde-haired noblewoman bow deeply side by side, offering solemn prayers to dissolve ancestral grudges. Overwhelmed by grief, Kyung kneels low as he silently begs his deceased parents and brother for guidance. His eyes flash with a dangerous, burning intensity as he vows to dedicate his entire existence to bringing down those who destroyed his family. Standing before the glowing ancestral tablet, Kyung reminds himself that vengeance is the sole reason he continues to draw breath. Meanwhile, the pampered blonde noblewoman groans in agony, utterly miserable from the physical strain of the endless bowing. Massaging her aching ankle, she bitterly regrets listening to her brother's advice to endure this grueling temple torment. Outside in the courtyard, rows of exhausted servants bow in unison under the blazing late afternoon sun. A couple of tired male servants quietly complain to each other about the master's inhuman stamina, wishing they could slack off. Nearby, two female maids gossip in awe as they watch the dark-haired princess, disguised as a servant, bow relentlessly despite her day of hard labor. Staring at the stone tiles, the exhausted princess remains deeply focused on her silent penance, ignoring the physical strain. Later that night, the servant quarters fall dead silent as the exhausted maids drift off into a deep sleep. Slipping out into the dark hallway, the princess stealthily creeps past her sleeping roommates in her white socks. Under the cover of night, the main temple hall remains softly illuminated by warm candlelight. Kneeling before the altar, the princess gazes at the flickering incense, carrying an overwhelming weight of guilt. She desperately prays for the souls of Kyung's family, begging that they find peace in the next life while she bears the blame. Suddenly, heavy silent footsteps approach the threshold of the dark hall. Kyung stands frozen at the entrance, shocked to find a servant girl earnestly chanting sacred Buddhist scriptures in the dead of night. His heart stops as he listens closely, utterly bewildered by why she is praying for the peace of his deceased family. Conflicted, he immediately tries to harden his heart, suspecting this is merely another elaborate trick to deceive him. Refusing to let his guard down, Kyung turns his back on her, determined to resist her apparent sincerity. He clenches his fist in silent rage, fighting the painful urge to believe her gentle devotion. A look of deep torment washes over Kyung's face as his warring emotions threaten to tear him apart from the inside. High above, a brilliant full moon cuts through the dark clouds, casting a cold glow over the silent temple grounds. Standing in the shadows, an elderly monk with a white mustache and a red sash observes the unfolding drama. He sighs deeply, sensing the tragic web of fate that binds the two tortured souls together. The old monk quietly watches as Kyung walks away, leaving the desperate princess alone with her prayers. The next morning, Kyung and the blonde noblewoman resume their formal bowing rites in the sunlit temple hall. Sneaking a sidelong glance, the arrogant noblewoman tries to read Kyung's inscrutable expression. But Kyung is completely detached, his mind drifting back to the painful memories of his past. A haunting question echoes in his thoughts, questioning if the princess was truly the one who betrayed him. He remembers the agonizing pain of waiting for her, wondering why she never came to save him from his torment. A painful memory resurfaces of a blood-stained younger Kyung desperately writing a letter pleading for a single lie to clear her name. Imprisoned and battered, his younger self begged for just one word of reply, any sign of her love. In the present, Kyung's face darkens with resentment, furious that her sudden piety makes him want to believe her after years of silence. Meanwhile, the oblivious princess continues to bow before the altar, completely unaware of his inner turmoil. Suddenly, a startling memory flashes in her mind, remembering a torn letter and realizing a catastrophic misunderstanding might have kept them apart. Kyung's eyes narrow in sharp focus as he struggles to shake off the lingering doubts. He recalls the emperor's shocking revelation that the princess had starved herself and begged to marry him despite his low status. Closing his eyes, he scoffs at his own weakness, wondering if he is losing his mind for desperately wanting to believe in her innocence. Sensing his distraction, a young monk sitting beside him turns to check on the troubled lord. Caught completely off guard, Kyung snaps back to reality as the monk calls out to him. Blushing with embarrassment, Kyung apologizes as the young monk notes his deeply distracted state. Smiling warmly, the gentle monk kindly advises the weary lord to stop pushing himself and take a rest. Kyung bows deeply, expressing his gratitude for the monk's kind concern. Standing up, he casts one last lingering look at the glowing altar still haunted by the ghosts of his past. Without a word, he turns and walks away, completely ignoring the blonde noblewoman sitting beside him. As he steps out into the bright morning light, the disappointed noblewoman can only watch his distant back, wondering what has stolen his heart. Her blood boils with absolute fury as she realizes how deeply that woman still reigns inside her brother Wani's heart. Under the bright morning sun, the weary princess begins her day by fetching water at the temple well. Exhausted from the grueling work, she struggles to keep her eyes open as a deep yawn overtakes her. She carefully lowers a wooden bucket down the cold, deep stone well to fetch more water. As the princess pulls the heavy rope, a nervous maidservant secretly watches her from behind a nearby wooden pillar. Suddenly, a trembling hand reaches out through the shadows to tap the unsuspecting princess on her shoulder. Startled by the sudden touch, she drops the bamboo staff as panic grips her entire body. Whipping around in shock, the startled princess recognizes the intimidating figure standing behind her. The stern elderly monk looms over them, leaving the terrified maidservant trembling in sheer panic. With an icy, commanding tone, the senior monk orders them to follow him immediately. The weeping maidservant slowly follows the monk, leaving the bewildered princess standing alone by the well. Desperate to protect her reputation, the blonde noblewoman pleads with the monk to keep her misdeeds secret from her brother. The unyielding monk narrows his eyes, coldly demanding to know exactly what she expects him to cover up. He ruthlessly exposes her crimes, confronting her about maliciously tripping the innocent servant girl on the steep stone stairs. His voice thunders with righteous anger as he accuses them of plotting a heinous murder inside the sacred temple walls. Slamming his staff violently against the stone floor, the monk banishes them from the holy grounds without hesitation. She desperately protests, arguing that the vital ancestral memorial rites have not yet been fully completed. But her pleas fall on deaf ears as the monk's cold, piercing glare cuts right through her soul. Humiliated and terrified, the arrogant noblewoman stands utterly paralyzed under the weight of his furious judgment. Meanwhile, as night blankets the temple, Lord Kyung lies wide awake, tormented by a storm of conflicting emotions. Sitting up in the dark, he is consumed by a haunting question of what his heart truly desires. Overwhelmed by agony, he covers his eyes, wondering if he seeks the painful truth or just wants to cling to his hatred. He quietly whispers into the empty darkness, desperate to uncover the true nature of the woman he once loved. Refusing to be tortured any longer, Kyung leaps out of bed, determined to end this psychological torment once and for all. He vows to uncover whatever truth lies hidden beneath her seemingly innocent mask. The silent temple hall stands bathed in a soft, ethereal light amidst the dark, quiet night. Inside, the exhausted princess continues to bow relentlessly, offering her sincere prayers for his family's peace. Her body trembles with extreme exhaustion, her breath escaping in ragged, desperate gasps. Knowing she is unworthy of forgiveness, she begs the heavens to bring eternal peace to his departed family. Suddenly, the room begins to spin as her vision blurs from absolute physical collapse. Just as she begins to fall, a powerful, steady hand catches her firmly by the waist. She gasps in surprise, looking up to find herself held securely in an unexpected embrace. Ethereal paper charms sway gently overhead in the quiet candlelit sanctuary. Lord Kyung holds her close, his stern gaze locked onto her fragile, trembling form. Weak and dazed, she stares back at him with soft, sorrowful eyes. As her consciousness fades, she collapses entirely into his strong arms, unable to fight the exhaustion any longer. He looks down, noticing her soiled, dirt-stained robes from her endless day of brutal physical labor. His voice cracks with a mixture of anger and deep sorrow as he asks why she would push herself to such a foolish limit. Standing alone under the sacred altar, Kyung holds his unconscious beloved, his heart tearing apart as the truth of her devotion finally shatters his cold armor.